Good evening. This time, the Newberg Planning Commission meeting will come to order. Can we get a roll call, please?
Randy Rickert,
Here.
Jason Dale,
Here.
Lainey Quinn. Here. Linda Newton Curtis,
Yeah.
Matthew Mansfield,
Here.
Jose Vallapondo,
Here.
Chris Wright is not here, and Elise Steffen is not here.
Okay, thank you very much. And we have some new commissioners. Well, we're only one in attendance right now, and so we'll let Mr. Mansfield, is that right? Please just tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're here and all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, so I'm a resident of Newberg. Good check marks there. I've been here for a little over a decade. Came initially for school here at George Fox University and then stuck around, and it's been a wonderful time. I love this area. I've got me and my wife met here, got married here, live here, have two wonderful children, and just really am passionate about this community and think it's a great place to grow, as the town says, and raise a family. And I'm excited to be here for the long term and wanted to make an impact and put my money where my mouth is, so to speak, and feel like I can have an impact and maybe make some sort of a difference in helping this community stay as great as it has been for me and my family. And so I've been asking to be on commissions for a few years now. And I think I finally pulled Bill's leg hard enough for him to consider me for one. And I'm really excited to be here and do what I can.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And traditionally, we usually go around the table to everybody says a little bit about themselves, but in the interest of time and everybody's time tonight, I think we'll leave that to the end of the meeting if the new chair so desires. So I've been chair this last year, and typically we have a rotating. Welcome, Commissioner Wright. Thank you. And traditionally the chair rotates, so there's no appearance of favoritism or anything like that, and everybody gets a chance to sit in the big chair and go through it. And so our traditionally the way that works is the vice chair steps up, but it's not necessary. So Commissioner Newton Curtis is the vice chair from this last year. Are you willing to stand for chair?
Yes, I am.
Okay. This time I'd like to get a roll call vote. Let's see. So we should do nominations. So does anybody nominate Commissioner Newton Curtis for chair for the coming year?
Planning Commissioner Wright, I nominate Linda Newton Curtis for chair for the Planning Commission.
Okay. Is there a second to that nomination?
I'll second.
Commissioner Rickert seconds, and I'll go by voice vote. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any against say nay. Hearing none, the motion passes, and Commissioner Newton Curtis, here you go. Here's the gavel.
Let's see.
Oh, and vice chair, so you can handle that part.
Oh. Oh, she says. Yeah. That's down hot feelings.
So
Yes.
when we get to, so when we get to the correct part, just follow the procedure. And then here's the end. So just do this yourself since we don't have a student commissioner.
Okay.
Any additional correspondence, and you have a prospective vice chair to help you along with all that material.
All right. Okay, good evening. Since I haven't done this before, I'm no doubt going to make a bunch of mistakes, so please bear with me. So I suppose the next order on the program is determining a vice chair, and this is going to be a new thing since I was the vice chair last time. So I'm wondering if we could have a nomination for vice chair for the planning commission.
Chris Wright, Planning Commissioner. I nominate Lainey Quinn as vice chair if she accepts.
Yes, I'll accept that. Thank you.
I'll second the nomination.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, motion.
Anyone against?
Oh, thanks. Anybody against that? No. So, this passes. Yeah, thank you. The motion passes and Lainey, you are the new vice chair. So, oh, thank you. So first of all, do we have any, public comments for items not on the agenda this evening? Okay, hearing none. We'll move on to the next part, which is the consent calendar.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the minutes from 12/12/24 as written.
Second?
Planning Commissioner Wright, seconds.
Okay, motion passes. The minutes are approved for,
We need a roll call vote.
Madam Chair, we need a roll call vote.
thank you. Faye, can we have a roll call vote, please?
For the minutes,
Yes, please.
we usually do a voice vote.
Oh,
6-1.
so all those in favor, say aye.
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 Motion passes.
All against?
Oh, gosh. All against. I'm glad we've got a really nice audience this evening. So, moving on to item number 7, the quasi judicial public hearing for CUP 24-0007. Conditional use permit to use a single family dwelling as a vacation rental at 315 West Lindgren Drive. And then I think I'm supposed to read something, right?
So. This one.
Okay.
You have to read it out loud.
Yeah, I know. I'm just reading it.
Could also be read by staff if you prefer.
Oh, that's fine. And so anyone on Zoom that wishes to make a comment and has not already submitted a testimony registration form, please send is this what I'm supposed to read? No, it's not. That's not it.
Chair, that was an additional statement because we had additional public interest on this one. So I believe that Ms. Bates had provided that additional statement about public comment.
Sorry about that.
So I just have to read this
Yeah,
one?
if you don't mind, we think it might help people that are tuned in.
Okay. So ORS 197. It's not this one?
The usual one.
I read
We're
this
going to do
one?
that next, and staff, we're going to read that.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
That's it.
All right. So, anyone on Zoom that wishes to make a comment and has not already submitted a testimony registration form, please send the following in the chat to the host. First of all, your name, your preferred contact information, agenda item you'd like to make a comment on, and raise your hand using the controls in your Zoom display. The administrator will call for testimony in the order the testimony request is received in the chat and will allow you to talk. Once you've testified and the commissioners have no further questions, the administrator will mute and lower your hand. People who have not submitted the requested information through the chat will not be called on for testimony during the Planning Commission's meeting.
Now, Chair, if you would like, staff can read that statement for you if you'd like us to.
I would love you to. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's go ahead and read the statement, and then we'll ask for ex parte and beyond. Thank you.
ORS 197.763 requires certain statements to be made at the commencement of a public hearing. The applicable city and state zoning criteria must be listed. This means that we must advise you of the standards that must be satisfied by the applicant prior to our approval of an application. The planning staff will list the applicable criteria during his or her presentation of the staff report. Persons wishing to participate in this hearing must direct their testimony or the evidence towards the criteria stated by the planner or other specific city or state criteria which you believe apply. You must tell us why the testimony or evidence relates to the criteria. Any issue which might be raised in an appeal of this case to the Land Use Board of Appeals, LUBA, must be raised in person or by letter at the local level prior to the city approving or denying the application. The law states that the issue must be raised in enough detail to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond. This part of the law is also known as the raise it or waive it requirement. If you do not bring it up now, you can't bring it up at LUBA. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval in enough detail to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action of damages in the circuit court. Prior to the conclusion of the initial evidentiary hearing on an application, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional evidence or testimony regarding the application. The Planning Commission will grant such requests through a continuance or extension of the record.
So do we have any abstentions, bias, ex parte contact, and objections to jurisdiction?
Commissioner Wright, I've been notified of CUP 24-007 by mail as an owner of a property within 500 feet.
Is that likely to bias your,
Absolutely not.
are there any others? Okay, hearing none. Could we have the staff report, please?
Good evening, Commission. I'm Leanne Wagner, one of the assistant planners for the city, and tonight I will be presenting the case for a conditional use permit for a vacation rental at 315 West Lindgren Drive. I enter the entire staff report for CUP 24-0007 into the record. The owners and applicants for this request are Rick and Susan De Mattei. Their request is to turn their 6-bedroom, single-family home on West Lindgren Drive in Newberg into a short-term vacation rental. The zoning for this area is R2 RD, medium-density residential riverfront district, and the applicable code portion for review of their request can be found in sections 15.225.060 and 15.445.300 to 350 of the Newberg Municipal Code. This next slide is an aerial image of the residence showing its frontage onto West Lindgren Drive and its adjacency to West Charles Street and West 9th Street. Next is a clip from the zoning map showing the home's context within the medium density zoning district R2 and Riverfront District, and likewise its adjacency to the community facility and Riverfront District to the south and Yamhill County further west and north of the subject property. The utilities map shows the house is also connected to the major water and sewer lines running south of the home along West Lindgren Drive And the city's GIS also indicates that a stormwater inlet grate is located at the westernmost corner of the subject property at the end of this street. The property is also served by underground power lines. Looking at the criteria under which to assess the request by the applicant, we find the code sections mentioned previously. Importantly, section 15.225.060A in regard to the character of the dwelling in relation to the rest of the neighborhood. The single-family dwelling is a 6-bedroom house with a garage and a driveway for use by the potential short-term renters. These characteristics are in keeping with the immediate neighbors to the east, west, north, and south. Furthermore, it is noted that the property is a short distance from parkland and was chosen to host larger parties that may be interested in visiting surrounding wineries and local amenities, and would therefore meet the code requirements stated in section 15.225.060B. And lastly, the section states in criterion C that the proposed use is consistent with this code, which includes NMC chapter 15.445, article 7, which we will look at next. The highlights for this section of code are as follows. 1, that the vacation rental must be a single-family dwelling, which the house at 315 West Lindgren Drive is. 2, that the dwelling must be registered with the city and the owner pay a transient lodging tax, and the owner has indicated that they will register with the city and pay the required tax. 3, maintain standards. The owner is providing 3 off-street parking spaces, occupancy for 12 guests, and that's no more than 2 persons for each bedroom, waste collection on each Tuesday, and will prohibit RVs or any other temporary shelters on the premises. And 4, posting, lastly, that the owner acknowledges their responsibility to post contact information for themselves and the police, vacation rental standards, maximum occupancy, and Tuesday as the garbage pickup day. In conclusion, staff is recommending that the commission move to adopt Planning Commission Order 2025-01 with conditions approving conditional use permit CUP 24-0007 for a vacation rental home at 315 West Lindgren Drive, Yamhill County Tax Lot, R3219, DC 03701.
So we'll go on to the public testimony. Do we have the applicant here this evening? Would you like to come up and make a statement? That's fine, you don't have
It's not
to.
rigged play.
Are there any other proponents? Okay. Are there any opponents or undecided this evening? Is there any written correspondence?
I have received no comments on this case.
Okay. Then we will close the public testimony of this portion of the hearing. Any final comments from staff? Nope.
No.
Okay. Then commission, does the commission have any questions for staff
No.
or any other comments? No? Okay, then do we have a motion? Can I just go straight onto that or not?
We want to close the public hearing portion and move on to deliberation. Oh, you did, sorry.
Then do we have a motion in regards to CUP 24-0007?
Thanks. Since we've had no comments, we also have no deliberation between us. No other comments from any commissioners? Okay. Planning Commissioner Wright moves to approve Planning Commissioner Order 2025-01 with exhibits A and B and attachments 1 and 2 for CUP 24-007, a vacation rental home at 315 West Lindgren Street, Newberg, Oregon.
I second that.
Okay, Faye, could we do a roll call, please?
Randy Rickert,
Approved.
Jason Dale,
Yes.
Laney Quinn,
Yes.
Chris Wright,
Yes.
Linda Newton Curtis,
Yes.
Matthew Mansfield,
Yes.
Jose Valiando,
Yes.
Okay, so we'll go on to CUP 24-00. Oh, I beg your pardon. So motion approved.
And at this time, I would like to congratulate Rick and Susan Dimitel. And I want to thank you for revitalizing the craftsman-style house to its original stature and lends to the historic character of Newberg, and saving some of Dundee's history as well. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. So I think we can go on to CUP 24-0008 now. The conditional use permit to use a single-family dwelling as a vacation rental at 510 North School Street. What to do? Okay, staff, could you read the announcement, please?
ORS 197.763 requires certain statements to be made at the commencement of a public hearing. The applicable city and state zoning criteria must be listed. This means that we must advise you of the standards that must be satisfied by the applicant prior to our approval of an application. The planning staff will list the applicable criteria during his or her presentation of the staff report. Persons wishing to participate in this hearing must direct their testimony or the evidence towards the criteria stated by the planner or other specific city or state criteria which you believe apply. You must tell us why the testimony or evidence relates to the criteria. Any issue which might be raised in an appeal of this case to the Land Use Boards of Appeals, LUBA, must be raised in person or by letter at the local level prior to the city approving or denying the application. The law states that the issue must be raised in enough detail affording the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond. This part of the law is known as the raise it or waive it requirement. If you do not bring it up now, you can't bring it up at LUBA. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval in enough detail to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action of damages in circuit court. Prior to the conclusion of the initial evidentiary hearing on an application, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional evidence or testimony regarding the application. The Planning Commission will grant such a request through a continuance or extension of the record.
You do not.
So in this regard, are there any abstentions, bias, ex parte contact, or objections to jurisdiction? Hearing none, I think we can move on. Staff, could you give us the report, please?
Yes, and this is going to sound pretty familiar. So hello again, Commission. I will now be presenting the case for a conditional use permit for another vacation rental at 510 North School Street. I enter the entire staff report for CUP 24-0008 into the record. There it goes. All right. The owner and applicant for this request is James Leone Jr., and his request is to turn his 4-bedroom, single-family home on 510 North School Street in Newberg into a short-term vacation rental. The zoning for this area is R2, medium-density residential, And the applicable code portion for review of his request can be found in sections 15.225.060 and 15.445.300 to 350 of the Newberg Municipal Code.
Leanne, sorry, could you go back one slide?
Yep.
The location on this one?
Oh, yep, that's my typo.
Okay, just
No, good eyes.
making sure I was paying attention.
Yeah. Good job. You earned a gold star in your first meeting.
How many gold stars for Brownie Point?
Yeah, sure.
Classified, that's nice.
Okay. All right, so this is the aerial image of the residence showing its frontage onto North School Street and its adjacency to East North, East Franklin, and North College Streets. And the zoning map showing the home's context within the medium density zoning district R2. And likewise, its adjacency to the M2 or light industrial zone to the northwest and R3 zone to the southeast. The utility map shows that the house is also connected to the major water and sewer lines running along North School Street. And the GIS also indicates that the nearest stormwater inlets are located at the intersection of East Franklin Street and North Howard Street. The property is also served by overhead power lines connected to the west side of North School Street. And looking again at the criteria under which to assess the request by the applicant, we find the code sections mentioned previously. Initially, section 15.225.060A in regard to the character of the dwelling in relation to the rest of the neighborhood. The single-family dwelling is a 4-bedroom house with a garage and a driveway for use by the potential short-term renters. And these characteristics are in keeping with the immediate neighbors to the east, west, north, and south. It's also been noted that this neighborhood is a short distance from downtown, and like the last vacation rental property was chosen to host larger parties that may be interested in visiting surrounding wineries and local amenities, and would therefore meet code requirements stated in section 15.225.060B. And lastly, this section states in criterion C that the proposed use is consistent with this code, which includes NMC chapter 15.445, article 7, which is coming up now. Again, the highlights for this section of code are as follows. 1, that the vacation rental must be a single family dwelling, which the house at North School Street is. 2, the dwelling must be registered with the city and the owner pay a transient lodging tax. And the owner has indicated that he will register with the city and pay the required tax. 3, maintain standards. The owner is providing 3 off-street parking spaces, occupancy for 8 guests. Again, that's no more than 2 persons for each bedroom. Waste collection on each Monday, and will prohibit RVs or any other temporary shelters on the premises. And lastly, posting. The owner acknowledges his responsibility to post contact information for himself, the police, vacation rental standards, maximum occupancy, and Monday as the garbage pickup day. And in conclusion, staff is recommending that the commission move to adopt Planning Commission Order 2025-02 with conditions approving conditional use permit CUP 24-0008 for vacation rental home at 510 North School Street, Yamhill County Tax Lot R3218DD 06700.
With that, we'll move on to the public testimony. Are the applicants here? Online or on Zoom? No. Any other proponents? Any opponents or undecided? Any written correspondence?
Staff has not received any comments on this case either.
Okay. Then I'm going to close the public testimony portion of the hearing. and, Planning Commission. Any,
So there's really the applicant's not here or a representative of them? Wow, okay. Because I did have questions. I noticed, are we in deliberation?
yeah, sorry.
Okay, I did have questions. I noticed that the applicant was gonna manage the property themselves. And they do not say how they're gonna book, at what age they will rent to, if they'll be allowing pets, what security systems they have up. And will they be staying on the property considering they live in Seattle? And how will they be managing this property? Does any of the other commissioners have any thoughts on this?
Any other comments?
So question for staff regarding Commissioner Wright's questions. Are any of those issues dispositive for complying with the applicable criteria for this application?
Not to my knowledge, the applicant has stated in his application materials, which I believe you have, that this is an investment property that he wishes to grant to his children in the future. So it is an investment property that he tends to manage himself. We don't regulate whether they list on Airbnb or Vrbo or any, online platform. So it's not a required statement from the applicant. As far as.
So we're not even aware if he's actively renting this, he's just leaving an option open, or is that, or do we know either way?
I don't have any knowledge about that. I don't believe that he intends to, oh, he did say Airbnb. Okay,
I was gonna comment in his general info. He states that it'd be listed on Airbnb for the modern family with pets or a group of friends looking to get away.
okay. Yeah, again, we don't regulate where they post their listing, what platform, or for that matter, what security system that they use for the property.
Applicant did state that there will be cameras.
Do you have other thoughts, Commissioner Wright?
No, I had my questions answered. Thank you.
Any other thoughts or considerations from the commission? In that, oh, did you have, yes, go
I
ahead.
get concerned about maintenance and stuff like this, and it's been huge complaints to this board in the past. And I wish they would have been here to comment about how they were gonna manage this property.
Blake, can I ask you a question? Would it be appropriate to table this one until the next meeting? Or is that something,
If this body would like to continue it and request that we contact the applicant to ask that they either provide additional details or be here for the next meeting, then we can do that. Although I'd like to ask Leanne if we know how we're doing. I think we're probably fine on the 120-day clock.
We're getting close.
Are we?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So we do have the 120-day time limit where a decision needs to be rendered by that time. If you give us a short break, we'd be happy to take a look at some of when the completeness was determined and figure out exactly how much time we have left. And it could be continued to our regular meeting, or a special meeting could be scheduled if you would prefer.
I think if it's tabled, we'd prefer to do it at a regular meeting. If I don't, anybody else have comments about that or thoughts?
Madam Chair, I think we should, before we vote on anything, we could give staff time to, 5 minutes to let us know how much time is left?
5 minutes should be plenty. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Unless we're missing something, we would be short by 1 day. The 120 day. Or the day before. Oh, the 119th day would be the day before. What day was it? 10/10?
No, we did not. Give us one moment.
Okay, we've looked at our shot clock. We usually try to stay within 60 days, just for expediency and customer service. We're currently at day 62. So day 120 is, yeah. March the 8th.
And when would our next meeting be officially?
Let me ask the rest of the commissioners something. Am I the only commissioner that wants to talk to the applicant?
Commissioner Quinn, I necessarily wouldn't mind hearing from the applicant. I like it when they're here so we can ask and address these questions, but I don't think it changes the fact that everything has been met and there are no conflicts and everything has been approved and recommended by the city.
So why don't we go ahead and staff. I'm gonna pull a commissioner on you. Okay, planning commissioner Wright moves to approve CUP 24-008 with attachments 1 and 2 and including exhibits.
Second the motion?
Okay, motion passes.
Not passes, roll call.
Gosh, sorry. Roll call, Faye.
Randy Rickert,
Yes.
Jason Dale,
Yes.
Lainey Quinn,
Yes.
Chris Wright,
No.
Linda Newton Curtis,
Yes.
Matthew Mansfield,
Yes.
Jose Halipando.
Yes.
Now the motion passes. And we'll move on to the next applicant, which is CUP 24-0004/DR 2224-0006. Miscellaneous 124-0018, conditional use, design review and stream corridor overlay permit to develop the West Branch apartment development on the corner of Hayes and Springbrook. Could we have staff read the, call for abstentions, bias, ex parte, contact, and objections to jurisdiction?
Commissioner Wright, I have driven by this site regularly, and I have a family history with a member of the acting administration of the Fernwood Grange, number 770. The only reason I knew about this, I've run into this person 3 times in 10 years. I will not be biased or let this influence any decisions I make in this case. Thank you.
Are there any others? Okay, hearing none, let's move on. Staff, could you read the legal announcement, please?
ORS 197.763 requires certain statements to be made at the commencement of a public hearing. The applicable city and state zoning criteria must be listed. This means that we must advise you of the standards that must be satisfied by the applicant prior to or our approval of an application. The planning staff will list the applicable criteria during his or her presentation of the staff report. Persons wishing to participate in this hearing must direct their testimony or the evidence towards the criteria stated by the planner or other specific city or state criteria which you believe apply. You must tell us why the testimony or evidence relates to the criteria. Any issues which might be raised in an appeal of this case to the Land Use of Boards of Appeals, LUBA, must be raised in person or by letter at the local level prior to the city approving or denying the application. The law states that the issue must be raised in enough detail to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond. This part of the law is also known as the raise it or waive it requirement. If you do not bring it up now, you can't bring it up at LUBA. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval in enough detail to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Prior to the conclusion of the initial evidentiary hearing on an application, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional evidence or testimony regarding this application. The Planning Commission will grant such a request through a continuance or extension of the record.
Thanks, Faye. Could we hear the staff report, please?
Thank you, Chair, Commissioners. Jeremiah Cromie, Associate Planner for the record. I'd also like to enter the entire staff report into the record for CUP 24-0004, DR 224-0006, and MISC 124-0018. Applicant on the project is DMKS LLC, with the owner being Worth Family LLC. The request is a conditional use permit approval for a 96-unit multifamily apartment complex with all 2-bedroom units in the C2 SP district, with a corresponding design review and string corridor application. The location is at the corner of intersection of East Hayes Street and North Springbrook Road. Tax lots are 3216, 02017, and R3216, 02025. The applicable criteria, I'm going to read these to you so you're aware, and we'll go through these. 15-220, site design review. 225, conditional use procedures. 342, string corridor. 343, areas of special flood hazard. 346, special plan development standards. 405, lot requirements. 410, yard setback requirements. 415, building and site design standards. 420, landscape and outdoor areas. 425, exterior lighting. 430, underground utility installation. 435, signs. 440, off-street parking, bicycle parking, and private walkways. And 15505 for public improvement standards. Location is there off the intersection of Springbrook and Hayes. To the north there, you have the intersection of 99W, or also known as East Portland Road. And you're from Meyer to the northeast. You have the drive-in to the west, and then the PGE yard also to the west. The zoning is C2, which is community commercial, as well as a specific plan, and that specific plan area is known as the Springbrook Oaks. And then on this slide too, it might be kind of see the blue is the stream corridor, and then that hatched red and blue is the special flood hazard overlay. In the Springbrook Oaks specific plan map, it is area A. Staff will note that this is not the exact current plan. Areas F and G have been modified, but does not show the area A very well. So this in area A has not been changed since the original. Utilities, there's utilities in Springbrook and Hayes Street to serve the development, as well as stormwater catch basins. The site plan You can see here, that there's 5 separate buildings here. There's 3 on the north side, 2 on the south side, as well as the parking there. So when staff went through the proposal, some project issues, which I will talk through on additional slides. The number of required parking areas, parking spaces, street trees within vision clearance, private walkway deficiencies, floodplain development, and exterior lighting concerns. Staff did receive almost 40 comments regarding the application. Mostly 3 items were common around those. The number 1 being lighting and how it affects the drive-in theater. 2, traffic on Springbrook Road, and then concerns about wetlands and ecological areas with the development. And then we did receive a fair amount of agency comments, and most agencies had no conflict with the proposed development as long as the appropriate permits are obtained. So applicable criteria, 15.225.060. I'll read this one. Location, size, design, and operating characteristics are reasonably compatible with the surrounding neighborhood and will have minimal impacts on livability or appropriate development of abutting properties in the surrounding neighborhood, with consideration to be given to harmony and scale, bulk, coverage, and density, to the availability of public facilities and utilities, to the generation of traffic and the capacity of surrounding streets, and to any other relevant impact of the development. So overall, staff finds that the location, operating characteristics of it can be made reasonably compatible and have minimal impact on the surrounding neighborhood with certain conditions. The proposed continue the residential pattern, and to just the east, you have another apartment complex across the creek, and that creek is known as the West Fork branch of the Springbrook. So the location, as mentioned earlier in that slide for utilities, has adequate utilities to the location already. The units to the east, as far as the apartments, are around the same density. And then it has access to a direct collector street, major collector street, and Hayes Street to accommodate the traffic. So to have the proposed development compatible with surrounding neighborhood, staff is recommending 2 lighting conditions to mitigate concerns of light trespass and lighting concerns off-site. They're following. Applicant shall provide an updated lighting analysis and photometric plan showing that 0.0 foot candles of light trespass extend past any property line. And then the applicant take actions to mitigate light trespass and glare to neighboring properties, including but not limited to use of exterior luminaires that are fully shielded, full cutoff, and downward facing to minimize off-site lighting, night sky pollution, and shining lights onto surrounding properties. And so a good kind of example of this on the left is showing how cutoff lights work. So when they're non-cutoff, they go all over. Semi-cutoff, it kind of splits. Cutoff just levels it down, and then full cutoff, it's cutting it all the way down. And so we conditioned it to have full cutoff, full shield, and downward facing to mitigate the concern. The foot candles, how it works is the intensity of light at a certain point. So at staff's recommending that 0.0 foot candles at the property line to have that intensity of light not go beyond the property. So this is the applicant's photometric plan, and just so you know, to your left on this screen is north. So if you're looking left, we'd be going towards the 99W and Springbrook intersection. To the bottom of your screen here would be the drive-in theater. So this is the foot candles that are shown by the applicant. And it's probably not easy to read on that screen. So it is in your materials. It shows the current foot candles. You can say something.
I'm gonna say, just in case anyone can't see it that's in the room, and I'm thinking of people in the audience in particular, what we're looking at is an overlay map that all of those little things that might look like a squiggle, depending on how good your vision is, those are actually numbers, and so those are showing the lumens at that point on the map. And so that's what we're looking at on this.
And then these is the south side, so Hay Street would be on your north. So this one actually is facing north on the top of the screen, and then Springbrook Road to the west. The photometric plan has the proposed lighting styles that the applicant would use on the left-hand side of your screen there. The second criteria for the conditional use is that the location design and site planning of the proposed development will provide a convenient and functional living, working, shopping, or civic environment. Attractive nature of use of its location and setting warrants. Proposed developments created a convenient and functional living environment. It's close to 99 for easy access and provides shopping and employment opportunities with nearby businesses. And then the third conditional use criteria is proposed development will be consistent with this code. They provided answers to code sections, and we'll go through some of these here in a minute. In addition to the conditional use permit, we're getting design review. There's additional criteria for multifamily, for design elements. So on any projects that require 9 or more units, they're required to obtain 20 or more points. There's a discretionary process and an objective process that was adopted, I believe 2 years ago in 2023. And so they have to score 20 points to meet it or go through the clear and objective standards. The applicant has chosen the discretionary process. Staff finds that they scored 22 points, 13 for site development elements, including open space amenities, preserving natural features and light and landscaping, and then the building design elements having same design elements as Oak Grove Apartments, which are across the creek. Building facades are also broken up by varying window sizes and color. So in the criteria for design review in 15.220.050B, there's 10 design review criteria, the first being design compatibility. And so it's similar to the apartment complex, and the uses around it are more of an eclectic use. So you have the drive-in across to the west, as well as the PGE contractor yard. To the east, you have the single-family development, as well as the apartment complex. To the northeast, you have Fred Meyer and US Bank. To the south, you have the Grange. So there's a fair amount of types of uses that have varying design styles. Applicants' materials fit both commercial and residential, and some of those include lap siding and changing in color. So parking and on-site circulation is the second criteria for design review. And it looks like it gets cut off there at the bottom, but that's okay. So for 2-bedroom units, they're required 1.5 unit or 1.5 parking spaces per dwelling unit, excuse me. And 15% of those must be labeled as unassigned. The applicant has not stated that they are going to be any assigned parking. So those are just not necessarily additional parking spaces required. And then visitor parking spaces are required for any developments requiring over 10 spaces at 0.2 visitor spaces per dwelling unit, which is an additional 20. So a total of 164 parking spaces are required. The applicant provided 159. So staff has put a condition in to update that to 164. Also, the development requires 24 bike parking spaces, only 12 are shown on the plans. So that is also a condition that staff has updated, as well as pedestrian walkways. So private walkways in 15.440 require a walkway out to both abutting public streets. So in this case, on both sides, there's 2 parcels. It's only going out to one street. It's all going out to Hayes. So staff has conditioned the private walkways to go out to Hayes as well as Springbrook. And only one of those would have to be ADA accessible. So the third criteria for design review is setbacks and general requirements. The lots are existing lots of record, the minimum lots of record. The minimum lot size for multifamily dwellings in the C2 zone, as well as the Springbrook Oaks specific plan, is 5,000 square feet. That is met. There is no maximum lot coverage in the C2 district for either the normal C2 or the Springbrook Oaks. Minimum front yard setback of 15 is met. So in the C2 district, it is a 10-foot minimum setback. In the Springbrook Oaks, it is 15 feet. The applicant is meeting all that and the required landscaping in the first 10 feet. Minimum interior setback is not applicable as it does not abut a residential district, although there is residential across the creek. And then the closest also interior setback is 19.9. And there's no maximum height requirement, although it's proposed at 37 feet. Vision clearance requirements are also required. You can't have any visual obstructions from 2.5 feet to 9 feet and a 25-foot or 50-foot vision clearance triangles. So those are the ones at the corner of Springbrook and Hayes, as well as the service drives into the apartment complexes. There are, I believe there was one street tree that was in there. And so we've recommended a condition that the applicant show that on their site plan and relocate those street trees outside the vision clearance. And then undergrounding utilities, all utilities are required to be undergrounded. Applicant stated that they will do that. And I want to get into exterior lighting. So as I mentioned, previously addressed in CUP findings due to compatibility concerns, the current code, Newberg Municipal Code, would not require shielding for the development. Applicant did provide the photometric plan as seen earlier that shows the foot candles to property lines and shows parking assembly areas eliminated as required. So number 4 of the design review criteria for has landscaping. And so ground level units have to have accessible outdoor space that has some type of privacy screening. The shared and individual outdoor space square footage is required based on number of type of units. 200 square feet is required per unit for 2 bedrooms, 19,200. Total of 15% of total lot area is required to be landscaped. Applicants proposed 44. And street trees are required in the planter strips, and they are proposed in the planter strip on East Hayes Street. Landscape island of at least 5 feet is required every 7 consecutive parking spots. So there are some deficiencies with this that staff has addressed, including the one that has every 7 consecutive parking spaces. The applicant has proposed to, instead of doing a landscape island in the parking, to run it along the edge of the parking itself with the sidewalk behind that. Staff is okay with that and has conditioned that appropriately. Also, I will mention the street trees on North Springbrook are already planted or behind the sidewalk. There would not be an additional requirement for additional street trees on the Springbrook site. And then also one other unit on this, the privacy screening for the accessible outdoor space for the ground floor units was not clearly shown, especially for the ones that faced the parking lot. And so the staff has conditioned that as well to be updated as in a revised landscaping plan. So this is the current landscaping plan that's been provided to staff. You can see those trees along Springbrook as well as the proposed trees on Hayes Street. The 5th criteria for design review is signs to be compliant with 15435. There was signs on the site plan, but not in any detail. So staffs recommend a separate sign review application to meet that code as presented. And then there's no manufactured dwelling, mobile homes, or RV parks proposed. So zoning district compliance is number 7 of the criteria for design review. The use of a multifamily dwelling is allowed in the C2 district with a conditional use permit. If you approve the conditional use permit, the stated density must be on it. Staff has put that in the record. It's 21. This is 20.91, I believe, which would be consistent with the Springbrook Oaks Area B, which is where the existing apartment complex is to the east. And then sub-district compliance, there's applicable sub-districts to this application, including the airport overlay, the stream corridor overlay, areas of special flood hazard, and the specific plan sub-districts, which I've been talking about. And so sub-district compliance, it's in the airport inner horizontal soft surface, which the height for that is approximately 314 feet. The proposed building height comes nowhere clear to that. But ODAV is Oregon Department of Aviation, and FAA, Federal Aviation Agency, would still be in place, including if they were to use a crane during construction for whatever reason, they'd have to file a notice with the FAA. And then as far as Springbrook Oaks, Area A, all the uses are the same as allowed as the base zone, which is the C2. Dwelling minimum setback is 15 feet. Interior setback is the same as the base zone, which is C2. Building height is the same as the base zone, which there's no street or no building height limit. Street trees are required, the minimum lot size is required, and there's no maximum lot coverage. And then I will address the stream corridor and flood hazard overlay on a future slide. So criteria 9 for the design review is alternative circulation, roadway and frontage and utility improvements, which is in section 15505 of the code. So the stormwater outfall easement on the plans goes on to the adjacent east property, also owned by the Worth family. We're requiring an easement for that to go on that property. And then no structures or large trees are located within or into existing or new easements. Applicant has to provide all the easements, and then required permits, including water, wastewater, stormwater, erosion control will be required, and any work done on Springbrook will be required to get permits from ODOT. Sidewalks will be responsible for replacing any sidewalks not in good condition or don't meet ADA on the frontages, so on Hayes and Springbrook. And then there's no existing sidewalk on the north side of Hayes from Springbrook to essentially the stream corridor that connects up with the sidewalk on Hayes. That'll be required to be installed. Street standards have to pay a traffic impact fee for the Springbrook and Hayworth Avenue intersection. Access driveways on East Hay Streets are going to be as far east as they can without being in the stream corridor. And then access on East Hayes because it's lower functional classification. So water improvements would have to be done, and then wastewater verified capacity, and any other permits needed, including stormwater, and then all plans would have to be constructed with the public works and design and construction standards of the city of Newberg. So street lighting was not provided by the applicant. This condition to be done with the public improvement permit. Conditions that staff's recommending is analysis of street lighting along Springbrook Road and Hayes Street frontages, demonstrating existing lighting along the project site's frontages meet city standards, or plans to install additional PGE option A street lights, and I'd have to extend to the center line of the street unless otherwise coordinated with or directed by the engineer. And then analysis to determine and address any potential lighting trespass onto adjacent properties on the west side of Springbrook, which will also be required where the drive-in is. And then traffic study improvements. That applicant did provide a transportation impact study, which found the proposed development is projected to generate 53 morning peak trips and 62 evening peak trips. And then all intersections are currently operating for City of Newberg standards in the 2025 proposed build-out year. The Springbrook and Fernwood, or East 2nd, the stoplight just to the south, is projected to exceed ODOT mobility targets during the evening peak hour by 2030. However, the planned bypass is expected to reroute traffic from that intersection and lower it to acceptable levels once constructed. There is adequate vehicle queuing storage space at intersections, and safety measures are not up to standard at East Hayworth and North Springbrook, and the proportionate amount will be required to go to fund the traffic signal at that location. So that next criteria, so that was design review criteria. The next would be the stream corridor. So here on the left is that map with the blue being the stream corridor, and then the applicant's proposed stream corridor intrusion. Basically, the only stream corridor intrusion is for the stormwater outfall and pipes going to the outfall location to the creek. So there's private and public service connections that are allowed within the stream corridor with the type 1 process, and it does have to be restored to its standards, including a bunch of planting. They did provide a stream corridor memo, and a wetland delineation was done and approved by the Department of State Lands, or DSL, for the properties. Only intrusion into the corridor, as mentioned, was for the stormwater outfall and the wetlands memo. It showed there's no wetlands, but the creek is a ordinary high water, so it's essentially it's a wetland, but it's a creek, not a wetland. So it's on there. And then flood. The applicant did not provide any floodplain development permit. The stormwater pipe does go in, outfall does go into the flood hazard area. Staff has recommended a condition to apply and obtain the floodplain development permit prior to any ground disturbing work. So staff would recommend that the commission move to adopt Planning Commission Order 2025-03, which approves the requested conditional use permit, design review, and stream corridor application with the attached conditions of approval in Exhibit D on Yamhill County Tax Lots R3216, 02017, and R3216, 02025. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Are you able to go back to the slide which showed the trees? And could you explain better the circles and their sizes and what means what?
Commissioner Wright, I was gonna ask about the trees too, considering they're in the airport overlay. If they grow over 37 feet tall, or however tall, they could impede a flight pattern. The reason I'm bringing this up is there was a private runway in Tigard, and the gentleman and his passenger hit a tree and died. Can you give me a comment about that, please?
I can answer that. As Jeremiah said, the height of the overlay there is 300 feet. I'm not aware of any 300-foot oaks to get into the overlay. All right.
Imaginary line for the FDA is what we're talking about
FAA,
here?
yeah.
Okay,
So
thank you.
the only thing that is like I said, cranes could be that, but most of those are what, 100 feet max, something like that. So.
Probably any ones we would use here.
I'd like to ask a question, Jeremiah. I think somewhere along the line, I heard you say that there were going to be two pathways, one onto Springbrook and one onto, is it Hayes? And only one of those was going to be ADA compliant. And I was wondering why that was.
Sure. So code states that all private pathways are supposed to be ADA accessible. Now but there's a provision in there that says the review body may change that at their discretion. So with the topography and the area, staff's recommending only one path out to either Hayes or Springbrook be ADA accessible. And see if I can. Maybe, I know. There we go. So right now there is, I'll use it here. So there's a pathway out to Hay Street from both of these main buildings, including a walkway across. There's also a walkway out to Hay Street from this south side. Staff's condition to have this pathway from this building out to, I believe it's building E. Sorry, look at my notes. I believe it's building E. Yeah. So it's one private walkway meeting East State Street. So what happens with this, what we're recommending here is to have another pathway out to the sidewalk on Springbrook on both the north and south properties. So that way people can get to walk to Fred Meyer if they so choose, or other employment or shopping opportunities.
And so that path close to Fred Meyer's would be ADA compliant?
It doesn't necessarily have to be. They could choose to do that. Only one of the pathways would have to be ADA
So
compliant.
the applicant
So
makes that decision?
They could do a staircase on one of them. So we're not precluding them from having to do all ADA standards.
I see. Thanks.
Commissioner Wright. But it is ADA standards for Americans with Disability Act requires all pedestrians have accessible infrastructure. An accessible path to travel is required on walkways to ensure an equitable transportation system and to provide transportation options for all users. It is my concern with the staircase, there are parents taking strollers, bikes, down a staircase with children are at risk of injuries. And this is also something I would like staff to listen to. A full accessible transportation system results in a high quality system for all users, and this is from ODOT. An accessible infrastructure has been linked to increased business opportunities, social development, health benefits, and increased independence among our community members. And I feel this is very important considering our population here. Thank you.
Does the commission have any other comments or questions of staff?
Yes.
Well, are we getting to is that the correct order? Just so that
I did notice on our Exhibit D conditions of approval, the applicant had requested to submit a stormwater report and plans for stormwater management to comply with chapters Newberg Municipal Code, Chapter 13.20 and 13.25. In this is also some, well, drainage laws. And I also looked up this property on our interactive map, and it shows the stream actually being on this property. And when you hit that icon to elaborate on it, the state has actually designated it as a wetland. Are you aware of that?
So the stream corridor, so the applicant did provide a wetland delineation report that the Department of State Lands, so you're talking about the Department of State Lands, which is the regulating agency, did approve their wetland delineation that was done by a qualified professional. So I'm not sure I'm following your thoughts or question.
Well, if a wetland is present on a piece of property, I'm going to back up a little bit. There's also supposed to be a study on any animals or things, and it's also been shown in public testimony that there are turtles and frogs have been rescued across there. I've seen animals through that area. And I'm wondering why with that wetland designation for that on the edge of this property, why that hasn't been submitted with this?
So based on the criteria we have for the stream corridor overlay, which would typically be our trigger if there's going to be then kind of an environmental impact, not typically a national level environmental impact study, but additional study required. There are thresholds and triggers depending on what the type of encroachment is inside of our stream corridor chapter. In this case, the type of encroachment and the degree to which the encroachment was occurring necessitated only a type 1. It didn't require that additional type of analysis that is required for certain types of encroachment. They do have to do mitigate the impact of what they're doing and do plantings for that and restore the site associated with all other provisions that are in our chapter. And those were mentioned in the presentation by Jeremiah, but we'd be happy to talk about those in greater detail if you'd like.
In addition to the 2 stormwater pipes that they're requesting for this DEQ fill and removal, is that being, what do they call it, separator oil with leaves and things like that through the stormwater master plan?
I will defer that question to Brett Music, our senior engineer.
Music, senior engineer here. So that review happens for all of those kind of things happens whenever they come in with their actual for the building permits. So that's when things are really looked at in great detail and the provisions and meeting the standards for all the stormwater requirements that are listed in the code sections you can reference. And that condition that's created with that is referencing what's in the code and also what's in our public works and design and construction standards. So when they come in with their building permits and public improvement permits, then that's when those reports, they've submitted a preliminary report that is actually beyond what we would do normally see as a preliminary report. And so they'll build on that based upon the conditions that we've issued in that, and then when that'll be fully reviewed at the time of those plan reviews with that building permit to make certain that all those criteria are being met.
But that is a type 1 and doesn't come before us, though.
Yeah, that happens when we have greater detail, and there's something. What happens with that is there's a lot of times those plan reviews, there's back and forth between the plan reviewers and the applicant's engineers as they work through to make certain all those requirements are met.
And I did want to talk about that delineation report. I do want to read the bottom of this for the record. Be advised that the state law establishes preference for avoidance of impacts to the waters of the state. But it is, this occurrence is for the purposes of state remove fill law only. We recommend that you attach a copy of this occurrence letter to any subsequent state permit, et cetera. But when it gets down here, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers will determine jurisdiction under the Clean Water Act, which may require submittal of a complete wetland delineation report. It's my understanding is that that just denotes the boundaries. And the department is even advising that that they should minimize impacts to waters of the state and may include refiguring parcel layout and size of development design. And is recommended that you work with the department and staff for appropriate site design before completing the city or county land use process. So I just want to make sure that it's not all inclusive just having that delineation report. There's other stuff to it. And I'm finding holes in this application myself for some of it. I thank you for comments, staff. Appreciate it.
Any more questions for staff? Go ahead.
Yeah, jumping back to the ADA accessibility, just to make sure I understand clearly, with there being only one, a need for one path that's ADA accessible, that's for the totality of the complex, not one on each side of, or one for each of the 2 kind of complexes being split by Hayes Street. So there, if I'm understanding correctly, you could have, let's say, the north complex be the one that has an ADA accessible pathway, but the south complex would not have one, and thus it wouldn't be ADA accessible by any pathway?
So each tax lot, so each part of the complex, so the one that has the 3 buildings on it as well as the one that has the 2, so each one would have to have at least one accessible path.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
And one more question. Do you know how much a two-bedroom is gonna be renting for?
I don't have the answer to that. You can ask applicants.
All right, thank you. No further question.
Any other questions for staff before we move on? Go ahead.
Touching on the photometrics a little bit. The plan that we saw seemed to be just a conceptual plan. When the project comes to fruition, how is that photometrics enforced?
Sorry, I was trying to pull up the photometrics plan. So what happens on that, so they have the photometrics plan and we've conditioned it to have a updated one showing that all the lights are cut off, fully shielded, fully cut off, fully shielded and downward facing. So when they were to submit permits for the development, they would need to show that on all lighting. And if we go back to this photometric plan, it shows on the plan, and you can see the lights they're proposed using here or on the other slide, but here it shows the type. So there's a SP1, and that 20 feet is the height of those proposed lights. And then showing out where the light would go as well as the foot candles. So what we would require is an updated photometric plan showing that the foot candles are 0.0 at the property lines and not going and showing outside of that is 0.0 at property lines and beyond from the proposed development. And all that would be done during the building permit review process.
So if I'm understanding correctly, they have to submit a finalized photometric plan.
That's correct.
Finance
And-
Committee-
Oh, I would add that if staff felt it was necessary, so we do typically look, when there are conditions of approval, those are things that get checked during the plan review process. They typically get checked during inspection. And and so we would expect to see an updated photometric plan as part of the building permit process. That would be a pretty normal procedure. And then we would also expect that if we felt it was necessary, we could go out and do kind of a check with a photometer if we were required to. The other thing I would add, just from a procedural standpoint, is the city does have ability to do enforcement. If we find that it's not functioning the way that it's supposed to be, then that's something that we can do even after if they've received occupancy. So we've had code compliance got called with a request for that to be investigated at different property in the city within the last 6 months. And staff went out at night and took a reading.
Jumping on that as well, I noticed this chart doesn't show estimated lighting from the buildings themselves, just exterior lighting. Is that a part of the analysis or is that also in consideration?
Sorry, can you repeat that question?
So that all looks like exterior lighting, so you can see the buildings in question. And I'm curious if this is including the lighting estimated through the windows of those residencies and out based off of the bulbs they plan to put in, the number of lights they try to put in the building.
So the plan does not include lighting inside the units, I think is what you're asking about.
Yes, inside the units,
Yeah.
shining out through the windows
So-
that are facing outside towards
Right, it's-
residents.
Okay, so yeah, it does not include the inside lighting facing out.
I have a quick question, kind of piggybacking on that too, because you were going through the different styles of lighting that there were in an earlier slide, and I noticed the bottom, oh, yeah, just a sec. The full cutoff was what, was delineated in an earlier slide referring to that. It has the one with the candle on the side that showed that it was only going down. But the SP1 and SP2 here, are those also full cutoff? Because I noticed it doesn't specify it on those two, but it does on the wall pack specifically. Are those gonna be full cutoffs as well? I didn't see if that was, it's hard to read. I tried to, and I couldn't tell if they were full cutoffs or not. And if the street lights are also taken into account in this lumens, or is that just the footpath ones?
So it includes the streetlights. As far as the shielding goes, I would talk to the applicant who's here tonight and get some answers as far as that, but it would be required to be fully shielded and fully downward, as well as full cutoff.
On the street lights as well as the footpath?
Yes,
Cool.
yes.
Okay.
Staff, can you comment on the polygons? Is everything included in a polygon added up to a total lumen amount? And will a sign be lit and add to lumens?
That's a question for the applicant. I also have representatives from PGE as well as ODOT if there's questions on additional lighting.
And I wanted to chime in on that too. So what we're looking at are right now, I believe, are the photometrics associated with the on-site lighting associated with the development, not the street lighting. I don't believe that's captured in the photometric analysis that we're looking for here. But there was a different condition associated with public improvements related to the analysis and the impacts that would have. So something to keep in mind is that there are different conditions, some for the on-site for the development that's a private asset. And those are what that condition, when we talked about full cutoff, full shielding, and downward facing, that's in that condition. The other condition that has more to do with the general impact and trying to provide some flexibility depending on what the types of available streetlights are and making sure that based on performance those can be met, those are something that's in the public improvements chapter, and that condition is different, but it was written in coordination with our engineering department so that we could give the applicant the flexibility to get the right kind of product there, but the products for streetlights that are available are different than those for on-site lights. And I'm going to make sure with our senior engineer that that's accurate. Brett?
That is accurate.
Other questions from the commission? I have one last question, if I may. I was interested in transportation and the study, and I'm wondering if there are certain designated organizations that our city accepts transportation impact studies from, or if the applicants can go to any particular organization that they deem they would like to go to.
I'll let Brett Music, our senior engineer, handle that, and ODOT also reviewed the plans.
Yeah, so it's a licensed engineer that's required to be preparing those plans. It's got the background and experience and education for doing traffic studies.
And are there specific engineers that we allow to do that for Newberg?
We do not discriminate in that regard as long as they're licensed and have demonstrated the
Okay, thank you.
abilities and requirements for that.
Because the person doing the study would have to have their PE, is that correct? And they'd be signing off using
That's correct.
PE qualifications. So just for Commissioner Curtis, the PE is a stringent qualification followed by years of, years of not only education, but also practice in the field of study, followed by extensive testing. And to get that licensing, that then they hold that standard. And it also gets, they have to re-up it over a continued series of years. And so anyone holding that qualification would meet an objective standard.
Thanks. Okay, any other questions for staff from the
Yes.
commission?
Commissioner Wright, another question. On attachment 1, page 429 of 480, you have a custom soil resource report. And on the Woodburn silt loam, you have 2310F, but there's no group F. There's one. So is that a typo? Is there only 4 hydrology groups in soil?
I will say I'm not a soil expert. I will let the applicant answer that question for you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if there are no more questions, I would like to propose a 5-minute break so people can go to the restroom, stand up, walk around, and let's reconvene at 8:35 on the dot. Thank you. I'd like to reconvene the meeting at this time at 8:36, actually. So at this time, I would like to take public testimony for the speakers other than the applicant. You have 5 minutes each, and I'll call your names one by one. For the applicant, you have 15 minutes. So is the applicant here this evening? if you'd like to come up and give us your name. And I think that's all I need.
Thank you and good evening. Can you all hear me okay? Is this adjusted well? Great. My name is Zach Pels. I'm a land use planner with AKS Engineering and Forestry, and we are representing the applicant tonight. Thanks for the opportunity to be here. All right. So we went through this. We've got our full team of experts in the house tonight, and we've got one member of our team, actually two members of our team joining online. So please, if you have any questions, don't be shy. We'd like to make sure that we can answer all of them. I do have a list of some of those questions that you were kicking around before too, so I'll try to get to those in my presentation. We've got a lot of stuff in our presentation that was already covered. We won't redo that. I do want to focus a little bit on I guess the conditional use, the purpose for a conditional use, and why the city has some additional authority to make discretionary decisions as part of a conditional use application, and talk a little bit about why we think that this conditional use is a little bit different than a standard conditional use. And then we want to focus the bulk of our attention on responding to those public comments, namely the lighting comments. I think your staff did a really great job of going through that. We've got a couple of other slides that we think will be helpful in responding to some of those comments, some of those questions, and some of the feedback from the neighbors. You saw the site before. I don't think there's anything here that we haven't talked about already. As we mentioned, the site is vacant. Here's an aerial view showing, again, the two parts of the site. The site is a little bit unique, right? In that it's bisected by Hayes Street, and it's got a pretty substantial portion of the east side of the site that's consumed by that stream corridor overlay. That just really kind of limits the options for development on the site, or how we lay this site out in a manner that's consistent with the city's code. And we think we've, in coordination with assistance from your staff, your planning and engineering staff especially, we think we've come up with a good solution here that meets all those code standards with the conditions which we are accepting of. Your staff mentioned this before, but I want to just reiterate that there is an eclectic mix of zones surrounding our property and uses surrounding our property that really makes it kind of especially challenging to develop on this site in a way that can, really be compatible with everyone. And again, we think that we've done a good job of that. But here you can see there's that industrial M1 zoning to the southwest, there's commercial zoning to the north, and residential zoning to the east. There's also unincorporated portions of Gamble County to the south. We looked at this already. The stream corridor lies east of the site. I think one important thing that wasn't covered in the staff report is that the city of Newberg completed a housing needs analysis in 2021 that shows a forecasted demand for more than 1,000 new multifamily homes over the next 20 years. This project will be a substantial advancement towards meeting that multifamily need. So the project includes 96 multifamily homes. We think that's important to meet your target for needed housing. And with that will be kind of the ancillary facilities that go with those homes. It'll be on-site parking, bicycle parking, landscaping, and open spaces. And we'll quickly run through this. Your staff pointed this out also. The site's kind of split in two parts: 3 buildings on the north side. That's this portion, and 2 buildings on the south portion of the site. Again, to try to complement the eclectic mix of uses on those surrounding properties, we went with a kind of more contemporary architectural style that is similar to the multifamily homes on the east side of Springbrook. Here you can see the front elevation of the building, the 3-story walk-ups. They have outdoor patios. This slide sort of highlights that flat sloping roof that will give it that contemporary look, but this side elevation kind of does a better job of showing that. And again, that's that architectural style will just be most complementary with the mix of different types of uses in the area. One really unique feature about this project is that many of the units will come with lower level residential storage, and that's going to make them really attractive and available for a broader range of residents. So where residents typically may not be able to take advantage of a multifamily home because of additional storage needs, this multifamily housing project will be different in that regard. In addition to the homes, we've got ample parking on site. Your staff mentioned as a condition of approval that we do need to add 5 spaces. We're okay with doing that. We can make that work. This is just the parking area on the north parcel, parking area on the south parcel. I guess the point I want to make here is that, this north piece, like I mentioned before, was a little bit more challenging to work with given the shape of that parcel and the stream corridor overlay. But we did our best here to buffer that parking area from the adjacent uses by locating that parking area interior to the site. And we've kind of went one step further in doing that and kind of highlighting some of those features that we had heard questions from the Planning Commission about earlier, by really putting a lot of trees and shrubs throughout the site to really create better screening and buffering around the perimeter of the property and from abutting properties as well. So here you can see kind of how those landscape trees and shrubs will screen parking area and the buildings on the site as well. And this will be important when we talk a little bit more about the lighting impacts from the site. We think this landscape plan will help to mitigate any adverse impacts from lighting from our site onto the drive-in in particular. This same landscape plan kind of marked up in a cartoonish fashion to just show like all the screening and vegetation that's included throughout the parking areas around the perimeter of the site. Your staff did a great job of going through the criteria, so we won't repeat that. So I guess the one thing we want to mention about conditional uses, typically a conditional use, I guess a more traditional conditional use is like a school in a residential zone where there might be certain periods of the day where there's really high traffic impact. We think this conditional use in this zone is different in that the impacts or the potential impacts from this conditional use are lower relative to the uses that are permitted outright in this zone. For example, the C2 zone permits outright hospitals, hotels, bars, and restaurants, really impactful uses when it comes to lighting, traffic, noise, hours of operation. And for that reason, I think it's important for you as you make this decision, this conditional use, to really think about how the city intended the C2 zone to be used relative to adjacent properties. When this property was zoned C2, the city council applied that zoning designation, and at that time determined that that zoning designation was consistent with surrounding properties. And in doing that, they understood that the uses allowed in the C2 zone, selected handful of what you're looking at on the screen here, could be compatible with those surrounding uses. And all of these uses on this list are, in my opinion at least, much more impactful in almost every way than our multifamily project. And so I just encourage you to make this decision tonight with that in mind. And I think we've really gone kind of the extra mile to make sure that we are being good stewards of this site and being good neighbors. But I think in the context of this conditional use decision, we are doing a good job at meeting those criteria. Your staff talked through the decision criteria, but they do cover a whole range of site and building design requirements, including parking requirements and requirements for public improvements, landscaping requirements, and there are standards in the code for exterior lighting, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So let's spend the rest of the time going through kind of our quick responses to the public comments, then I'll take a minute to respond to some of the additional commissioner comments that we heard. So there were a few pieces of public testimony, at least, that talked about impacts to that stream corridor. As your staff pointed out, we submitted a wetlands delineation, and we also submitted a stream corridor memo that's required for the type 1 stream corridor review. And that stream corridor memo responds to Commissioner Wright's questions about impacts to the flora and fauna in that corridor. And that memo, which is included in your packet, says that because of the very minor impacts that we will have, and your staff pointed these out, but I'll just show you again. It's this area in orange. That area in orange consists of only temporary trenching to install an underground stormwater pipe and basically a rock pad where that stormwater can be outfalled onto that rock pad that will be restored to native condition once that underground pipe is installed. Because of that temporary impact and because of the relatively small nature of that impact, the applicant's natural resources scientists determined that there would be absolutely no adverse impact to the ecological or functional integrity of that stream corridor. And that, I guess, to answer your question about impacts to plants and animals, that is evidence that was supplied by the applicant, and that's in your packet. The same thing on the south side. So what we were looking at before, this is this small area of impact on that north parcel. There's one point where that stormwater will outfall, and there's one point where the stormwater will outfall on the south parcel as well. Same response from the applicant's natural resource scientists. Moving on to traffic impacts, we covered that. We did employ a professional traffic engineer to prepare a transportation impact study. And as your staff pointed out, that, I guess the scope of that analysis is coordinated with city staff and it's coordinated with Oregon Department of Transportation staff. So they have to agree upon what intersections get looked at and kind of the basic framework for that analysis. And that analysis demonstrates that there's really no need for any mitigation beyond the contribution of a fee towards an existing project that the city has in their transportation system plan. So we're agreeable to that, and your staff included that as a condition of approval. All right, now the big one. So lighting impacts, there were a lot of comments. I think your staff mentioned there were 40 pieces of public testimony submitted regarding impacts from lighting. I want to let you know that we love the drive-in. I mean, I think we are very interested in making sure that the drive-in remains a viable long-term amenity for residents in Newberg and throughout the region. It's a great facility. And in fact, our photometric plan and our lighting design was based with the drive-in in mind. And it does include, I got a quick list here of some of the mitigating features that we built into our photometric design to make sure that the impacts to the drive-in would be avoided. And so we do have dark sky compliant lighting that's fully shielded, downward facing lighting with glare shields that go around the side. And like your staff had a really great diagram that showed the effect of having that shielding on the side of the lighting to really contain that lighting. In addition to that, our pole mounted lighting will be oriented away from the drive-in so that further minimizes impacts to the drive-in. And then finally, for the building mounted lighting, we will mount that lower on the building so that there's reduced opportunities for that light to spill off. And those lights will be kind of a lower lumen rating or lower candle power rating to kind of further mitigate any potential for adverse impacts. We talked a little bit about the photometric plan, and I'll flip over to that in a minute, but this exhibit here that you're looking at, is there a pointer on this? The very top? The middle? Perfect. Which is a good screen to point it at that you can all see, the side one? So this pink line here shows the extent of the 0-foot candle contour as modeled by our photometric analysis that was prepared by Windsor engineers. And you can see here that 0-foot candle contour currently extends just a little bit beyond the edge of our property, but not much. It doesn't even go into the travel lane on Springbrook Road. It just kind of hugs the edge of the sidewalk. There's a condition in the decision that asks us to kind of tighten that up, and we can do that. But what this shows is that 0-foot candle contour is a long ways away from the screen at the 99 Drive-In, which is shown at the south here. And I've got a couple more slides that kind of help illustrate how we are doing everything we possibly can to mitigate impacts here. So we looked at this already. This was that photometrics plan, but I'll zoom in a little bit, and I think you can see here, these numbers here show 0.0 foot candles, and you can see that 0.0 foot candle boundary does not even extend into the travel lane on Springbrook Road. Again, we can tighten that up a little bit, but that's what this pink line on this next sheet is based off of. The screen for the 99 Drive-In is approximately 600 feet away from the nearest light emitting source on our site. So we think, in addition to the kind of all the mitigating elements that have gone into our specific lighting design and that distance, that's really good evidence to support that we're really gonna have no adverse impact on that drive-in screen. And on top of that, and I guess this is kind of the final slide, the addition of all those new trees that we're gonna be planting along the Springbrook Road frontage and the addition of these two groves of existing trees, those are supposed to be tree groves. They're there, trust me. There's just a lot of physical barriers that are between our site and the drive-in as well. And so I think all of those things together, you know, provide really strong evidence that we will not have an adverse impact on the drive-in. And especially relative to any of those other uses that would be permitted outright in this zone, right? So I think, again, this decision needs to be made with consideration to the rights of the property owner and the general list of uses that would otherwise be allowed on the site. I don't know how I'm doing for time.
You have 30 seconds.
I have 30 seconds to answer, let's see, ADA access. So the code requires that we have one ADA access per site. We're meeting that, right? We'll meet that with the condition of approval, and there's just kind of a cherry on top. We'll have an extra access on each site. We're okay with that. I talked about the impacts to the stream corridor. I think that's it. Oh, soils, that 2310F is Woodburn silt loam. Second. I don't know. I'm just seeing 2310F on our natural resources survey map, and I'm not sure what page that is. My copy doesn't have those same. Is this the same sheet? Is this the sheet you're looking at? Yep.
A being a percolating type of soil and then the others end of the spectrum, barely, no percolation, extreme runoff, capstone with clays. And so I'm probably thinking that might be D. So I also wanted to let you know that was a typo on your.
Okay. Take your word for it. Thank you. Well, thanks for your time. I'm happy to try to answer any questions that any of you may have. Thank you.
Questions? Commissioners?
Commissioner, right, will you be having a lit signage?
We do not have a sign included as part of this plan at this time. I don't know the plan for any future signage. Thank you.
I have a couple questions.
You should probably state your name.
Thank you. Commissioner Mansfield. Sounds funny. So in regards to parking, this site doesn't have any street parking possible. And I probably should have asked this to the city first. Looking at the general area with the other neighbors that you have, and there's a park nearby, and there's some single-family homes and some condos and then apartments. Going into that area, all the street parking is typically taken up anyway. How are you guys confident that you're not going to have spillover with the parking plan that you have in place?
Yeah, I think that question came up several times throughout the development of our application. We were very interested in trying to maximize parking on our site, considering that we don't have any on-street parking. I guess we don't expect that there would be much spillover into the adjacent neighborhood just because of the proximity of that available on-street parking. However, your code would not prohibit that, right? I guess if that does become a pattern, that use of on-street parking is allowable per the code.
So people can park on Springbrook and walk over?
You can't park on Springbrook, right? You can't park on Springbrook, and you can't even park on Hayes in front of our site,
Exactly, so
right?
there's
Right.
no street parking.
Correct.
And the nearest by street parking that is there is adjacent to a park, another apartment complex, condos, and single family. That space is already saturated. How are we sure that when you add in 96 more units with 2 bedrooms each, that 164 is gonna handle all of that? And, do we, how?
I mean, your code says that for 96 two-bedroom units, the standard is 164 parking spaces, and that's what we will provide. So I think we're relying on the guidance that's built into your code to determine that appropriate number of parking spaces.
Understood. Second question, I think it kind of got answered by one of your slides, but one of the comments made by the citizens here was about the concern of laser pointers and the additional sight lines that your site creates to that screen, both in an elevation standpoint and being able to, you have a row of parking spaces that all point towards that drive-in that creates opportunities for people to frankly, I think harass the, consumers
Sure.
of the drive-in. I see you have foliage in place, but were concerns, or was that a concern that came into the design, or what is the direct plan to mitigate that issue?
Yeah, the vehicle headlights were, and that's why we have that kind of dense row of plantings along that row of parking. The laser pointer question did not come up, and I guess, those are things we hope aren't an issue, and probably really, as part of this design process, can't totally control in a way that would be fitting with the kind of the character of the area. I mean, I think there might be some design solutions that would ultimately look kind of funky if we tried to prevent stuff like that. So I guess, yeah. So I mean, we definitely considered the glare from headlights, and again, I think this does kind of a cartoonish job of showing how that vegetation helps to screen those impacts.
But for the additional sight lines with the residences in their windows being able to have sight line to the screen, that wasn't part of the concern or mitigation?
No, that wasn't. And I mean, one of the things we haven't really mentioned is we didn't have time prior to this hearing to prepare like a section view of what our site will look like relative to the screen. But the grading will be such that the buildings will kind of be set below the grade at Springbrook Road. If you're familiar with the site, you know that the site drops off from Springbrook Road at a high point down to the creek on the east side, and that's going to be graded much flatter across that, and in doing so, it'll drop down. And so the elevation of the top of the buildings, won't necessarily be 37 feet above the grade of Springbrook. I don't know off the top of my head what that will be. But again, the ability for future residents to see the screen, or people at the drive-in to see lights on in the residential units will be reduced because of that kind of that grade element. The other thing is that, again, you could put a hotel on that site, or you could put a bar or restaurant on that site without going through this conditional use process. So again, I think it's important that the city consider that this conditional use process does give you the discretion to talk about some of those additional mitigating features where we're adding a hotel or a bar or restaurant or a hospital would not.
Yes, but any concerned citizen can request one of these meetings be brought up for any building, I believe. Maybe I
It's still though
misunderstood that.
even if a permitted use were called up to a planning commission decision, you still have to make your decision based on the applicable criteria, which with regard to lighting just says that you have zero spillover beyond the property line. There's nothing in the code, right, that says the abutting property shouldn't be able to see lights on in somebody's home, or there should be zero opportunity to shine a laser pointer, right? I think that's my point, is that again, out of respect for the rights of all property owners, I think we need to consider it relative to what is permitted in the base zone. It's kind of the base.
Yeah,
base
no, I
impact.
understand that. But, okay, and trying to understand here with the 0-foot candles, that is only for the permanent lighting on the
Right,
structure.
yep.
That doesn't involve the ambient lighting that would come from the residences, correct?
Correct, yeah. So it's building mounted lighting, it's pole mounted lighting. It does not account for light within the building. Correct.
Even though there's a plan for the amount of light that would be, I guess, stock put into each resident.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm not an expert to speak at that, but I just anecdotally know that the intensity of both the pole mounted lights and the building mounted lights will be greater than the intensity from the lights in the interior of the homes. And so I think what we're looking at here is a good and probably conservative representation of the light impacts in total.
Thank you.
Others? Other questions? No? Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And are there any other proponents that need to speak? Okay, so I know we have some opponents, and the first person I would like to call up is Zach Peltz, is that correct? Oh, my apologies. Then the first person is Sonia French. And if you come up, state your name and make sure you switch on your microphone. And you have 5 minutes.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Sonia French, and I'm a member of the Fernwood Grange number 770. I'm joined here today by my life partner, Mark Rea, and other members of our Grange. I serve as the current chaplain, and I share the role of secretary. Mark is our building guy and deals with all things related to the Grange building. We're happy to have a chance to speak here tonight regarding the proposed West Branch apartment complex for the area on Hayes and North Springbrook Road. A little background, Mark and I came to Newberg in April of 2021. We immediately loved its charm, antiquity, deep spiritual fellowship. We were captivated by its roots in not one but two historic pioneer movements, a real entrepreneurial spirit, and farming traditions that may be disappearing but do still exist. All of this in this little town. In 2021, we knew that we were also looking at a time that had slipped into the past with today's current pandemics, wars, and political discord. But we did have some hope because we weren't in Portland anymore. I moved to the Portland area in 1986 and Mark in 2014. We've watched as Portland has gone through economic cycles, evolving only to devolve due to poor planning, a lack of insight into community needs, and/or ineffective governance. Mark and I have lived through it over a few decades. The transformations of Portland have been stark. Once revitalized areas have reverted despite growth, and many would agree today that the city's soul seems lost amidst poor leadership. The last thing we want is for Newberg to mirror Portland's downfall. Within months of moving here, we became involved with some of the active community groups, such as the Fernwood Grange, Love in the Name of Christ, and later we would also include the Fernwood Pioneer Cemetery and the Newberg Thrift Shop. We wanted to participate because we saw an effort to cultivate a community here. The Grange not only became a second home, but is also a focal point for community gatherings and being of service to the community. So speaking of which, I would like to emphasize that the proposed West Branch apartment complex threatens the quality of life within this community. It endangers two historic locations, the 99W Drive-In and the Fernwood Grange. These places are more than just buildings, they are heartbeats of our town. They foster social bonds, they preserve traditions, Since 1953, the drive-in has been operating, outlasting entertainment trends, VHS, DVD, cable, and streaming services. They survive. Why? Because we want them here in this community. The Grange is rooted in its spot since 1948 and is the result of activities of a community group that were formed in 1931. So both of these are very historic places. The proposed construction will lead to increased light and noise pollution. This will negatively impact the drive-in experience for customers and diminish the value of local homes. It will disrupt natural drainage, replace our green spaces with concrete, and overshadow the Grange and neighboring residences. Furthermore, with rental prices projected to exceed $2,000 per month, let's consider who this development truly benefits. Newberg has evolved from a rural farming town to suburbs, but still surrounded by beautiful hills and vineyards. We can resist further urbanization that strips away our unique identity. Instead, we can enhance our existing treasures. We can reimagine this area as a place to serve many. It could be an open market, a flea market. We could use a veteran center, and there's undoubtedly a need for that. It could be a place where artisans, farmers, home crafters, and community groups could showcase, sell, or exchange their products with others. We can make this area a focus of health, wellness, unity, and service, rather than a concrete jungle, which in 10 years will fall to urban decay. So, in closing, let us strive to keep Newberg's heart beating within its unique rhythms, not the impersonal pulse of urban expansion. And I thank you very much for your time and your consideration.
Thank you so much. I don't believe we have any questions for you, so. The next person is Mr. Stavros Gibson. Oh, sorry.
Will you
Is
please turn on
your-
your microphone?
Yeah. And give us your name.
Hello, my name is Staris Gibson. Good evening. Thank you for being here tonight as we discuss something deeply important to our community. A couple of things: preserving our historical Grange and protecting the unique character of our neighborhood. I am a veteran. I'm a single mom of 3 boys. I'm a proud Grange member. I'm also on the Grange board as the secondary secretary. I volunteer a lot in Newberg. I'm a Rotarian member, a Noon Rotary member. I'm a chamber member. I own a small business, Gibson Auction Services. What I tell my children often is, Mommy volunteers a lot, but what you need to do is you need to do what's important to you. And one of the most important things is to volunteer at the Grange. So the Grange, accompanied by the iconic 99W Drive-In Theater, stands as a symbol of our shared history and a testament to the values that define us. These 2 landmarks are not just buildings or businesses. They represent community, tradition, and a way of life that we cherish. But if we allow large-scale development to overtake this area, we risk losing everything that makes it special. The increased traffic will bring gridlock to our quiet streets, making it harder for families to enjoy their daily lives. What I'm worried about is not just 1 or 2 weeks into post-project, but also what could happen as a number of apartments in Newberg have the problem of that we see trash and litter become common sights, and the number of vehicles will overwhelm our already limited infrastructure. With more people passing through, possible crime rates are bound to rise, threatening the safety and security of our community. One thing that's really major is the natural beauty and peacefulness of this location will all but disappear. The fields, the open spaces, and the charms of our town will be replaced by noise, congestion, concrete, and bright lights. This area will lose its unique identity and start to resemble Portland, a bustling and impersonal urban sprawl when you stop knowing who your neighbors are. Preserving our Grange and the 99W Drive-In isn't just about keeping old buildings intact, it's about protecting the soul of our community. These spaces represent who we are, where we come from, and what we value. They remind us that progress doesn't have to mean losing our history or compromising our quality of life. We have a responsibility to push back against changes that threaten our traditions and a lot of our Quaker values. Let's work together to ensure the future generations can enjoy some of our well-known community spirits. The Grange also isn't just a historical building for me. It's a lifeline for my small business and others like mine. It provides what every small business owner dreams of, but can't attain because it costs too much. Location, location, location. The Grange offers an affordable, accessible, and adequately sized venue that makes it possible to not just host live auctions, but dog training, birthday parties, weddings, funerals, baby showers, and more recently, meetups and business picnics. I don't support any development near or around the Grange property. If we allow this space to be altered or diminished, we're not just losing the building, we're just losing every small piece of our community's foundation. Without the Grange, small businesses like mine to host family events and gatherings will just disappear. I noticed part of the city's PowerPoint, they mentioned Blanco Friends of Night Sky. And thank God for a small computer in my hands. Just letting you know, Blanco's in Texas. That's not representing Oregon. So I looked up darksky.org, and according to their website, which is international, Oregon is home to 5 locations of total dark sky locations, which means they have no lighting at that state park. And according to darksky.org, 5 lighting principles for responsible outdoor lighting. And we heard from kind of all the sides of number 1, is it useful? Use of light is only as needed. Number 2, targeted, direct light so it falls only where it's needed. Low level, light should be no brighter than necessary. Is it controlled? The use of light only when it's needed, which use of control such as timers or motion detectors to ensure that light is available. And they should be warm colored. And as I was looking through the city documents, it doesn't say anything about warm colored. To limit the amount of shorter wavelength, parentheses, blue-violet light, to the least amount needed. So to me, the Grange is more important than just bricks and mortar. It's a place where history, community, and opportunity intersect. And we must do everything we can to preserve not only the Grange location, but also the 99 Drive-In. And we must do everything we can to preserve it, not just for those who rely on it now, but for future generations and who will one day need a place to build their family memories. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming to testify. And the last person. I got this. Oh. I think that's it. This was something else. This isn't for testimony. Oh,
Does anyone else want to testify?
Yeah, we had that one.
no, this is Leanne.
Did you fill out a blue sheet, sir?
Online. He told me, he double checked.
It's our first night. Yeah, give just a moment.
Oh, thanks, Faye. My apologies. So Stephen Brunner, is it?
Yes.
Thanks. If you'd come up, give your name and switch on the microphone.
My name's Stephen Bruner. Been a resident of Newberg off and on for the most part since 1965. I am a retired electrician, retired pyrotechnician. I am a member of the Fernwood Grange as its one of its board members and the treasurer. I've been in construction all of my life, residential, commercial, industrial, mostly as an electrician, but I've also done underground work, piping, drainage, etc., roofing, all of it. I would like to talk about the 3 common things that electricity, water, explosives, and light all have. They all follow the least path of resistance. Plug in a bad plug-in into an outlet. It follows path of least resistance, shocks you, shoots out, it's trying to get away. Same with lighting. It follows natural lighting from windows. This type of lighting follows the path of least resistance. It not only just glares off of other items, it'll glare off the concrete, you know, from a window, from a car, it'll glare off of top of a car windows. There's nothing you can do to stop it. So if I'm living in an apartment and I open my windows, that light's gonna glare off onto the car, from the car to the building, from the building to the atmosphere. So if it gets up into that particles of the atmosphere, it's just gonna bounce back down. Good way to prove that, go outside here in the city of Newberg on a clear evening, look up. You don't see a lot of stars. Go 5 miles out of town, see tens of thousands of stars. So your lighting in the city is like garbage. It hits the particles and it bounces back down. There's no way to stop it, none whatsoever. You can't stop the car lights from not reflecting off the building, off of the road, off of other items. You can't stop it. It's going to reflect right from there all the way over to that theater. In my career, I did lighting. The permit you were talking about and the licensing, I used to have one of those. No, I haven't updated it. So lighting is just going to bounce around. You can't, there's no way to stop it. No way to get it out of the particulates from flashing back onto everything else. So when the theater was built back in the 50s, I know growing up, I went there. I don't know if the rest of you have ever been there, but it's a pretty cool place. I'd hate to see it go. I'd hate to see them close down because they've got a bunch of trash lighting coming in and ruining their view. Now let's talk about water a little bit. Water takes the path of least resistance. A year ago, we had some flooding at the Grange. We couldn't figure out why. Still don't know why. I was called at about 9 o'clock in the morning, said, hey, get down here. And I just live right down the street on 2nd Street. I came out of Mountain View, went down 2nd Street to Springbrook Road. And my window's down. What do I smell? I smell sewer. What do I see? I see water shooting up out of the manhole covers. City of Newberg is there. Fernwood Road is blocked off, closed. They've got barriers up. I turn left, go down to the Grange. Sure enough, not only do we have water coming up, but we have city sewer coming up in our basement. Seriously, called hydraulics. Water takes the path of least resistance. We don't know why it happened. I haven't been able to figure it out. Maybe it was because of the building across the street burned and the water wasn't shot out onto the street. I do know that every time you disturb Mother Nature, every time you dig the earth, you are creating a new path or a broken path. Earth acts as a sponge, soaks up the water, expands. Water wants to take the path of least resistance. Obviously, during last year's flood, it came up in our basement for some reason. So the infrastructure on that end of town, obviously, cannot handle what we already have during storms at all. How is it going to handle this new 96 unit apartment complex if it can't handle what we already have? How many millions of dollars is it going to take to repair what we have now and upgrade it so it will handle the 96 apartments? That's my question. I can't seem to figure that one out. Last year, look in your records. City of Newberg spilled sewer into the creek during a rainstorm. Also, I hear that they want to be good neighbors. About 3 years ago, they asked if we would let them use our driveway as access to their property so they could put a golf shop in. We said, sure, pave our complex for us. Any of you see any paving around our complex? They came in and said they were going to do it anyway. We asked about the paving around our complex, and it was a handshake agreement. Oh, we don't have to do that. No, we said no. And we haven't seen them back since. They haven't come to pave on a handshake agreement that they agreed to do. In their paperwork, all their proposals to you, there's a one-line sentence that says the Fernwood Grange would make a great development property. I have news for them. In 2011, our property was approved to go on the National Registry.
I'm so
And
sorry,
in
Mr.
18
Bruno.
months, pardon?
Your 5 minutes is up. I'll give you,
Okay.
thank you.
Mhm.
We do appreciate you coming in to talk. Okay, could we have,
Could I speak? I didn't fill out a paper, please.
We do need a paper.
please state your name.
Kurt Landis. Thanks for being here. I live next to the Grange Hall on the opposite side of the development. A couple things that just haven't been brought up that I'm mostly concerned with. Ever since Springbrook has become a US highway, there has been enormous amounts of wrecks on that road. It's a parking lot at least 3 or 4 times a day. Now you're gonna add this many more cars to it, this much more traffic, as well as the cars trying to get out of the apartment and turn onto Springbrook Road. How have you done anything to make sure there was gonna be a turning lane or better access at that corner? Because as soon as 100 more cars get to that light and stop that light a day from morning to night, that's that much more congestion between there and 99 and from there the other way as well. It's already turned into so much of a parking lot. A lot of people drive through Newberg to get to Dundee because so many people are traveling the other way to get to St. Paul or I-5. Just bringing up a concern. What Steve said about the sewer, that sewer was supposed to get taken care of when Springbrook Road got redone. It was supposed to get buried about 10 or 15 feet lower, supposed to be a foot bigger. It got wiped right off the plan. Never got done, never got replaced. So it's caused a lot of problems for other people that want to develop, including these nice people. But the traffic is a huge, huge problem. Obviously, once the bypass is in, it wouldn't be as big of a problem. But right now, it's gigantic. And there doesn't seem to be any concern whatsoever about it at all. On top of that, by the time they get that building up and the cars are sold, you're gonna have a certain percentage of electric cars in that parking lot. How many charging stations do they have in it? 1, 5? I mean, what are you gonna have, 50 cars in there that need to be charged? And where's that power come from? So those are my concerns. I just wanted to bring them up. I'm definitely not for it because of the traffic, but I don't blame somebody for trying to develop their property because that's their right. At the same time, yours as a commission is supposed to look out for the city. And you guys, everybody that lives here knows that road is a disaster. It's supposed to be a feeder road, not a US highway. But right now it's a US highway. So it should not be used, shouldn't have additional traffic thrown at it time and time and time again. It doesn't seem like there's any worry about it. So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you for coming. At this time, the applicant, if you would like to rebut,
We have someone on Zoom who'd like to make a comment.
my apologies. Yes, person on Zoom, could you state your name? And go ahead. And make sure your microphone's turned on.
What's on? I see to take care of each other and keep my looks there when I.
Hello?
Do you have a puppy? What is face? Oh, sorry.
Can you chat? Chat them? Do them in chat.
Lose, you lose.
Okay, let's move on then. If the applicant would like to come up and rebut.
Chair, I do have a comment that was received this afternoon that I would like to read before the applicant does the rebuttal. So you had at your chair a email that was sent to Assistant Planner Wagner this afternoon regarding another subject. I'm going to read the portion that is relevant to the proposed development. So it's in let's see, the last paragraph. It says, sorry for the complex question and thank you. I've also heard the tree ordinance situation is gaining some attention. Please let me know any way I can help. I'll try to be at the planning commission meeting tonight. I see there's some fuss around apartments planned across from the drive-in, and that would just be an awful place for development. I drive that road almost every day and can't imagine the traffic implications and the risk it poses to the Grange and drive-in. Thanks, Brandon Slider, and then his phone number.
Thanks for that. Okay, I think we're ready for the rebuttal.
Thanks again. I'll be brief. I don't think there's too many new points to raise, but I do like to take a minute to respond to these comments. So we talked a lot about traffic and the potential creation for gridlock, and also that traffic would impact both the Grange and the drive-in. As I mentioned before, we provided an analysis prepared by a professional traffic engineer that demonstrated to the contrary, in fact, that there would not be any operational or safety concerns that were in excess of the city's standards for the area intersections. As we talked about, that transportation impact study was developed and agreed to by both city staff and ODOT staff, and we're confident that that is an accurate analysis of the forecasted traffic conditions after this site is built. There was a question about the site creating trash and litter that would be a problem. I think that's speculation. We don't see that will be a problem. There was a comment about losing sort of some of the benefits for the Grange, losing some of the benefits of the vacant property next door, and that's that's the nature of I guess urbanization, right? So this property is inside the city of Newberg, and it's in the urban growth boundary. It's zoned for commercial use. It is been the city's plan since likely before it was even zoned commercial that it would be developed in this fashion. So I think what is happening today, what is before you today, is exactly consistent with what the city has planned for this property. This is consistent with the city's goals and vision for this property. I mentioned that the city forecasts demand for more than 1,000 new multifamily homes. We think this project is a fantastic addition to the community in terms of really meeting an important need for needed housing long term. So we feel very confident that this is a really beneficial project for the city. There was some speculation raised about rental prices in excess of $2,000 per month. I'm not sure where that figure came from. That's not accurate, and that's we don't know what those numbers are at this point. So just to set the record straight there, that hasn't been determined.
Excuse me? You don't know the rental prices you're going to be charging for these units? Is that what you're saying?
Correct. I guess kind of piggyback on what I said before. There was some testimony that directly stated that this person would not support any development on this property. Right? Again, what we're doing is consistent with the city's plan for this site, and is consistent with I guess the expectations for individual property rights. And so the expectation that the site would remain vacant indefinitely and held under private ownership, I think is an unrealistic expectation, just to be frank. There was some commentary about dark sky principles, and The woman who testified to that effect read off kind of a list of what it takes to be effective in terms of providing dark sky lighting. We think we're doing all those things, actually. We have, color temperatures of 3,000 Kelvin or below. That's kind of on the warmer end of the spectrum. We've got all that full cutoff. So all those things that she mentioned there, we are doing, and we've done intentionally to try to be respectful of the adjacency to the Newberg 99 Drive-In. There was, I guess, Mr. Bruner commented on kind of the physical characteristics of kind of how light will glare off pavement or off of cars and other surfaces. I suspect that that's true. But I guess to me, that makes a more compelling case for a use like the drive-in not being located in an urban area, right? This, again, the nature of an urban area is that it will develop at densities, especially in Oregon, right? Densities that support housing and jobs, so that areas outside of the urban growth boundary can be preserved in kind of a more rural or timber type of fashion. And I think if we're getting so far into the weeds of trying to analyze refraction of light off of water particles in the air and how that might over time eventually impact adjacent uses, I think we've lost sight of kind of what that original principle or goals around urbanization are. What we are doing, again, we're looking at a more direct impact of our site relative to adjacent sites. We think, again, using foot candles as a metric for those pole mounted lights and for those building mounted lights really provides good evidence to support that. While we may have some sort of impact as far as Mr. Bruner is concerned with regard to refraction off of water vapor in the air, we're not going to have a direct impact onto that screen with our light spillover. I think those were kind of the main themes of the comments, and again, appreciate everyone's time. I appreciate all the comments. We do. Again, we think that the drive-in is a fantastic addition to the region. We think it's a fantastic attraction, and we're hopeful that it's here for a long time. I'm happy to answer any final questions if anybody has any.
I have a quick question. One of the women that testified mentioned the idea of motion detectors for some of the lights. Do you think that might be something that could be applied? I mean, would that be realistic? I don't know.
So for I guess the building mounted lighting and the pole mounted exterior lighting will be, I guess it will be based on kind of a schedule that is determined by a seasonal schedule, right? So when it's dark, they'll be on, and when it's not dark, they'll be off. That lighting is just necessary for safety, right? We need a certain amount of lighting so that people can walk around without tripping, and so that people can make sure that they can adequately surveil the area to make sure that there's nothing kind of fishy going on, or they don't need to be concerned about anything. So I think I haven't ever seen an example of where you would have motion activated exterior lighting, and I don't know that would really satisfy those kind of safety desires that we would need to make sure are built into the site.
Yeah, I just wondered if it would be something that would be feasible. It was
Sure.
just a question.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Planning Commissioner Wright, on attachment 1 in your application materials PDF, page 304 of 480. Page 304. Use a rainfall of 1.25 as part of your submission for runoff flow in the stream, for the stream corridor. And that uses an example of 0.2 cubic feet per second, and 1 fluid gallon is equal to 7.48. So in your report, that would mean it would be 0.02% of 4.8 gallons, which ends up 19.2 ounces timed by 60 seconds, timed by a day, timed by by a 24-hour period. And that ends up resulting in 12,960 gallons in a 24-hour day to be discharged in your stormwater. And that has to do with drainage, and there are some drainage laws here in the state of Oregon. So how are you going to keep your neighbor from flooding?
Yeah, good question. So I won't speak to kind of those specific quantities that you pointed out here. If one of the members of our engineering team wants to come up and do that, they can. But I will say generally, you're absolutely right. Oregon has a very well-known and strict drainage law that says we must release stormwater runoff from our site in a post-development condition in the exact same degree as exists today. So our post-development runoff needs to match the pre-development runoff. And that's what this stormwater report is all about. It's about modeling the pre-existing condition and then remodeling the condition on the site after the development. And that's why we have those two stormwater outfalls into the creek. So it's not just about making sure that there's no runoff. We want to make sure in this situation for sure that there's the same amount of runoff because that creek and the frogs and everything that lives in it rely on that being wet. So we have this preliminary stormwater report in here that proves that after development, stormwater will run off at the same rate as it does today. And we will refine that as we go through our final engineering. We will revise this and kind of fine tune that, like your senior city engineer said. It is still an iterative process going forward from here. So this is the preliminary stage. After this, we create kind of more detailed design plans that will further flesh that out. Taylor, I don't know if you want to come up and speak to any more of that.
Hi, Taylor Ireland, civil engineer at AKS Engineering and Forestry. Not much to add in regards to what Zach put, but basically we are required not only by Oregon drainage law, but also by Newberg stormwater management to release stormwater at or less than the pre-developed rate in our post-developed condition. So I'm not sure if there's a slide that shows our stormwater plan, but there is a large underground detention system on both properties that will help collect and detain the water and release it at its rate it's allowed.
Any other questions, commissioners?
Yeah, Commissioner Mansfield, just jumping on to something that Commissioner Wright had asked and mentioned, and this is my first time doing this, so I'm sorry if I'm asking questions that aren't right. In a concern for the added chemicals that would go into that wetland based off of the 164 parking spaces and those cars being in there, is there something that you guys are required to do to mitigate that? What does that look like?
Good question.
Yeah, it's a great question. No, stormwater is the really a bulk of the project and design that goes into consideration. So we actually are required to collect and treat that water. We can treat it through a variety of ways, whether that's with planters or proprietary treatment systems. So basically that water will be collected, detained, treated, all before discharging and entering the creek.
Then my another question that came up that I had and trying to understand things in a better scope. Given that the drive-in is on the historic register or it's a historic building, that creates more desire to meet kind of that needs of that neighbor, I guess, or at least acknowledge them. And as I think you guys have, I still am curious about the lighting that could come off, not just from the fixed lighting that's going to be in the building or exterior to the building, but the lighting from the residences inside the apartments going out through the windows, along with the parking spaces with that have cars' headlights pointing at the drive-in. You'd mentioned some of the foliage there, at least for the parking spaces. I'm curious, like, what is the extent that you're willing or able to collaborate for more reduction in light? Ideas come to mind to me, but nothing is set in stone for sure, but tinting those windows that face the drive-in, or putting up more of a physical barrier at car headlight level, or things of those natures to help reduce that concern and ensure that we're not, harming that historic site.
Yeah, so, I guess we haven't talked specifically about this. I'm not really in a position to offer up other additional mitigation. Like I mentioned, I think the trees will really be an effective screen in that,
Do you know what type of trees there are? I'd like to understand that better.
Yeah, we have that,
Yeah.
we do have that in our landscape plan.
And then that question is kind of also directed at the city, saying that you guys had proposed some things initially, but coming up with other things that the other commissioners are seeing. How are we able to reevaluate that?
I think that the tactic that staff took was looking at, similar to the public commenter who mentioned dark sky principles, looking at some of those dark sky principles and including those, and that was why we used some of that language about full cutoff, shielded, and some of those. And it does mention in some of the product specifications that are included in the application materials that there are things like glare shields and those sorts of things, but hearing them mentioned here in the hearing that those would be included, so that's a more definitive thing than we were able to see because we're normally just looking at the specs. So those things would be desirable and good to have. But also, if I recall, the height of the trees, or the mature height of the trees that go along Springbrook, is approximately 45 feet for those height, and most of these buildings are only supposed to be about 37. Now, that's a mature height, so it's going to take a while to get there, depending on what their planting expectations are, and I don't know that.
On that though, and I'll find out when I hear about what trees are
Sure,
being planted,
sure.
but if it does get to that full height, then you have potentially from ground to some certain height where there is no foliage exposed, to help protect from lighting the sides of the trunk of that tree. And if we have a row of cars parked there, then that doesn't mitigate that concern.
And I will let the applicant respond to that part. So, and that's part of why staff didn't get into that level of detail. We're gonna try and look at more a strategic level, less a tactical level, because it's the applicant, it's their site, it's their right to manage their own property, and that's how we would look at it. And so what we saw, or what we tried to apply with the conditions of approval, like I mentioned before, for the on-site lighting, it was more one about 0, 0 at the property line. That was what we were worried, and the reason we used that fully shielded, thank you, full cutoff and downward facing had to do with glare. You want to make sure that even if it's something that's a low light intensity, you still don't have a raw bulb facing something that's an undesirable location. But some of the things they've mentioned, I think, are helpful. But again, we went for more of a performance basis with most of those, which was that 0, 0 at the property line, as well as giving them some flexibility to conduct an analysis that'll demonstrate that the street lighting that goes in will be a limited impact to the extent that we can.
Thank you for helping me understand. Appreciate it.
All right, so your first question had to do with the type of trees. Those are going to be red sunset maples, according to our landscape plan on that portion of the north side.
Just to add to that, that's a deciduous tree, so it's bushy and not a fir tree with needles.
Right. The other thing, I'm just looking at the preliminary grading plan right now, and again, I apologize, I can't give you the page number in your packet because mine is laid out a little bit differently, but if you know where your grading plan is, I can talk you through this. The bulk of our parking will sit about 5 feet below the grade at Springbrook, and that will provide an effective physical barrier.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. So yeah, keep going.
Yep, I mean, that was really the point. So this, got the pointer here. So this whole row of parking right here will be about 5 feet lower than Springbrook here. These will be not quite that far below. That looks to me like that's just a couple feet below the grade of Springbrook. Yeah, and so, the vegetative screen there will be the kind of the effective buffer there.
And those maples, the foliage starts, a mature maple, roughly where do you start to see the foliage bloom?
How high, like, is that the question?
Yeah, like I'm gonna see solid trunk to X, and then I'm gonna see the bush of that tree. I mean, unless it's like an arborvitae or something, it doesn't.
Yeah,
Those-
I mean,
Those trees that I know of don't start with
when it's
leaves right at
fully,
the
when it's
base.
fully mature. I don't know the answer to that question.
But probably roughly above the height of
Yeah,
the average car light.
the trees, right? So there's a mix of trees and shrubs in there,
Okay,
right?
yeah, yeah.
So they're interspersed, so there'll be
Okay.
low-level shrubs and trees.
Thank you. That
Yep,
helps me
yep.
understand that foliage line better.
So this is Commissioner Newton Curtis. If I'm understanding this properly, though, with deciduous trees, they drop their leaves in the winter, which means that the light would go through the branches, so it wouldn't really give any, or give the same level of protection as it would in the summertime.
Commissioner Glenn, I'd just like to point out that they do close for the winter after December, just to make a fair point. Because I tried to make it and they closed down.
Well, after December gives kind of quite a bit of time, but yes.
Thank you for answering my questions. I appreciate it.
And this is Commissioner Wright. I actually study light. That's one of my backgrounds of my education. And Mr. Bruner, photons or energy photons will travel until absorbs and particulates will scatter. The atmosphere can hold up to 4% water saturation, and it can hit light particles. That's not in your control. So yes, they do that. And then, I want to reiterate, I found this property to be on the Oregon Wetlands Database. And can you comment to me why you do not consider, and the city, why they do not consider it to be wetlands? Thank you.
I think the distinction that Mr. Cromie was making, and that is made in our delineations, is that we have, there's an active channel, and that's just different from an area that's kind of normally inundated and has wetland types of plants. This has actual water in it all the time. So the state DSL makes the distinction between wetlands and waters. This is considered water. It's still a protected feature, and that's what our delineation calls out. I guess that's the extent of the answer to that question.
Okay, I'm gonna stop you right there. I'm gonna read you something. When I looked on that map, I noticed the headwaters are underneath now DIC, or the old Rite Aid location, and across the Springbrook southwest under Hawthorne Avenue, closely paralleling Springbrook until Portland Road, courses south and southeast to east side of the property, seeking where the apartments are seeking to develop, and terminates into a pond area. And this is where it's weird. You've got this stream coming in and it disappears. And then to your west, a significant little portion, you have headwaters coming out again of that west Springbrook Creek. And according to the state of Oregon, this is classified as a wetland. And the one on closest to the east side towards the apartment is classified as a wetland ravine. And the one to the west that opens up and on your property is classified as a freshwater forested shrub wetland. Did you know that?
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to find our wetlands delineation here. I think the short answer is that
This has nothing to do with the delineation. This just is that your property is classified as having a wetland on it.
Sure. And the way that works is that kind of that state database is based on kind of high level reconnaissance based on those soil surveys that we talked about before, that can sort of guess at where there may be wetlands, and that's part of it. Or I guess old wetlands delineations. It's kind of a combination of those things. Our current wetlands delineation, which was agreed to, concurred with by Department of State Lands, is more recent than that. And so I guess, the short answer is that the nature of those wetlands changes over time, and the location and the existence of wetlands also changes. So I guess my response to that would be what we have submitted and the information that this application is based on more accurate information than whatever's on the state's database at this point.
So, sir, are you telling me that you are more accurate than our state's website with ISRI
Yes.
using a,
Yes, yes, I am.
okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate that.
Any more questions to the applicant? Okay, thank you.
I did.
Oh, you
actually
did,
have
I
it.
apologize.
No, it was not much a question as much as a point I was hoping to make. Hopefully be really quick. You've stated several times about some code. First of all, I'm really actually quite happy with a lot of the lighting that I've seen because it was such an issue with the comments that we received. I was actually really happy to get a breakdown and it helped alleviate a lot of the concerns that I had. So I appreciate the attempts that you are taking, given the historical importance of the drive-in right there. So, and the grade especially, I think that's actually, it helped me understand the situation a little better. So I appreciate the efforts you guys have put in with that. Throughout this process, when you were speaking, you did cite, Newberg needs more housing. That is correct. We have a lot of housing coming in, but you're absolutely right. We need more to meet demand and population growth. You mentioned by adding 5 more spaces that you would be meeting code, which is correct. That was outlined in the staff report, and then you addressed that, and that will be corrected. So that's correct. It is to code. The city approved the zoning for this space, which, as you mentioned, is a really diverse space. We got lots of different zones kind of all culminating, and you're right. It is approved for this sort of build and to code, and you're absolutely right. In your rebuttal, you mentioned that you wanted to be respectful of the space and the light consideration. I think you've taken a lot of that in and have tried to do what you can to respect that as much as you can, and I appreciate that. But going back to something you referred to, like we were saying, as a diverse space that you mentioned in your opening, taking into consideration the space that you would occupy would be more, I'm referring specifically to parking. Coming back to that, having been on the commission for a year or two, parking is a constant issue with citizens of the city. There is no access to street parking, as we've addressed on Hayes or Springbrook. And having been in apartments before, when there is no potential overflow parking, it's untenable, especially when you would have to walk a great distance from the rate is based on how many people would be in an apartment. What if someone has a friend over? It's adding 5 spaces is to code, you're absolutely right. But given that there is no street parking, and adding 5 would be specifically to the bare minimum that the state code does approve, I think out of respect, as you had used that term in your rebuttal, that adding more than just the bare minimum 5 would be more respectful of the space, given the significant historical importance of the area that this is in the middle of, in that diverse zoning area. I think going above and beyond respectfully with more than just the code 5 spaces would put a lot of people at ease and be respectful of the space.
I appreciate that comment. And in fact, we couldn't agree with you more. We would love to have 50 more spaces if we could. The way we're going to get the 5 more spaces that we need to meet the minimum requirement is by shrinking up some of the existing spaces that we have. We don't have any more space to put parking spaces. And we're also trying to be realistic about the types of vehicles that people drive in Newberg. There's a mix of vehicle sizes from like full-size pickups to compact cars. And these spaces have been designed currently to accommodate that mix. It's not a parking lot full of compact spaces, right, where we could get a bunch more spaces. We're trying to be, again, realistic about who's going to live here and trying to accommodate those people realistically. So I guess the short answer is we will continue to think about ways to increase parking in a way that makes sense for the residents, because that is very important to us, and that is something we've been talking a lot about, is the need for parking.
Yeah, given there is no street accommodation, and you mentioned that in the very beginning, it is super unique how it's kind of divvied up, and they've got the different angles and everything, and the grade, so unique areas require unique solutions.
Yep, Yep.
So I would encourage you to take that into consideration to help appease a lot of the historical importance of the area. It's not
Understood.
overwhelming.
And will do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Wright, if approved this evening, have you considered negotiating with the range to pave their spots and ask for a income producing overflow parking for the Grange?
I'm not familiar with those prior conversations, so I'm not able to really speak to that. So that has not come up during my involvement in this project. Thank you.
Okay, I would like to now close the public testimony
Thank you.
portion of the hearing and move on to any final comments from staff on recommendation.
Sure, just a couple clarifying comments. I believe somebody mentioned the Grange was in the city of Newberg. It is currently unincorporated, but it is in the urban growth boundary of the city of Newberg. There's also a comment about EV parking. The building code requires 30% of parking spaces to be EV ready. The applicant does show EV spaces on their parking plan or not site plan. With that, staff would recommend the commission move to adopt Planning Commission Order 2025-03, approving the requested conditional use permit, design review, and stream corridor applications with attached conditions of approval in Exhibit D on Yamhill County tax lots R3216-02017 and R3216-02025.
Thank you, staff. Okay, so let's move on to our planning commission discussion. So what do we think?
I would just like to kick this off by thanking the staff. I can tell there is a lot of effort and time and consideration that was put into this part, very much so. So thank you guys very much. A lot to cover, so thank you.
I'll start if nobody minds. I think this is a pretty good application. The applicant's done a lot of work to listen to the community and listen to concerns and try to address them the best they possibly can. I tend to agree with Mr. Pels that a lot of the concerns he's talking about is amounts to, okay, build nothing here. Well, that's not realistic. People who own property can do what they want with it within the rules, and that's what they're attempting to do. I don't know how you could mitigate the lighting situation any better. The laser pointer comment, I mean, somebody that creatively malicious, I don't know what you could do from a planning perspective to do anything about it, that you just gotta go try to track them down and on an individual basis, and there's gonna be all kinds of things that could pop up like that. Drainage is always a concern, but I think they've done a good job to address it. Traffic, staff, they did do a traffic study. Yeah, so absent a competing traffic study, we're forced to agree with their conclusions, and same since this is directly abutting a US highway as mentioned by one of the people here, that means it's under ODOT's purview, and since ODOT hasn't said anything about this being a problem, we're forced to conclude as a commission that there isn't going to be a problem with traffic, at least within the limits they have for congestion and trips and all the different criteria they use for those things. So yeah, as it's a lot of the concerns I see people bring before, and this is a different one, and it's density. And the thing with density, I'll say to everybody here, is that's really not something we're able to do anything about, because that comes down from state regulations. And we, acting as judges in this capacity, have to follow state law. And I don't agree with the law. As many people come up here with everything, they're excuse me, I forget who it was. It's French, maybe. Talked about Newberg becoming like Portland, and it's mismanaged, and it's like forcing everybody into a box, and more people, but they're doing that throughout the whole state, throughout every city, and they're doing a couple different things. They say, okay, you need to increase your density, and by the way, you can't increase your urban growth boundary, so you're constantly forced more and more into this one space. And if you attempt it, Thousand Friends of Oregon comes along and says you can't do it, and so you're stuck either way. I would still encourage you, all to follow the Shawshank Redemption, Andy Dufresne remedy and write 2 letters a week to all your Congress people, local people, and make a lot of noise. That's the only thing you can do to possibly affect the situation. But other than that, we as commissioner are, in my opinion, in the situation of approving this application because the applicant has met all the criteria, and that's how it is.
I would say the applicant has exceeded the criteria that were put in place, even by addressing a lot of the concerns that were brought by the community. And I think I agree with your statement there, Jason, that the concern is more towards the bar that has been placed and why the bar is placed there, not whether or not they exceeded the bar. It's pretty clear that they've exceeded the bar that has been put in place.
This is Commissioner Newton Curtis. I'm sad to say that I agree with you, and I really am sad to say that. The only part of the code that I could see that isn't met, potentially, and that I think the applicants haven't explicitly stated, is that of livability. I've mentioned this many times, I know, but that is one part of the code that I think we also have to look at.
For one point, other point I was gonna make, it's 97 units, isn't that correct? 96? So that's 100 people or 200 people that are going there. If we say you have 2 people per unit. So we talk about a threat to the drive-in. Well, what if those people are drive-in customers? Okay, now the drive-in has more people, so they have more money to do things and do stuff. And the point with that is not to say, okay, I think that's gonna be the case, or I think it's going to be bad or good. It's the point is we as commission are not allowed to kind of look at that kind of thing because it could be this, it could be that. We don't know. We don't have a crystal ball to know what the future is going to be, and it could be a good thing. It could be a bad thing. We just don't. We don't know that, and so that's part of the rationale behind why we decide how we decide.
This Commissioner Mansfield, livability is a really good point. You know, we look at 96 2-bedroom units that, in a general trend of the price of rents going up everywhere, more and more residents are forced or compelled by their resources to cohabitate with other income producing renters. I know for the majority of my time before I was married, I always had as many people as I could fit into my apartment to make rent as cheap as possible, to save up as much money as possible, to be able to afford a home and move out of renting. And that put me in a position where I always, with me and my fellow tenants, at least doubled the amount of expected vehicles for our unit. We had 7 guys with 8 cars in a home here in Newberg that was being rented, or 3 guys with 4 cars in a 2-bedroom unit, much like the ones that are on that are going to be going in here. And so livability is a big concern, even though they're willing to meet exactly what we've asked for with parking. I guess my frustration is more with our city code not addressing the ability for off-site parking being within a walking distance, and that compelling for more on-site parking to be made, because that would absolutely address the livability concern. Because rough math with 96 units and with 2 bedrooms each, that's 192 individuals if one person's per bedroom, and if all of those are vehicles, it's 192 vehicles for 164 spaces. You've got, what is that, 28 vehicles that don't get to park there, that have to then park a quarter mile away to be able to get to their apartment, and then that puts all that livability concern back on the single family homes and the other apartments in the same area.
Commissioner Wright, I've got to say, I'm honestly disturbed at the applicant's comments that the state's maps are not as accurate as theirs. And our city shows the same that the state does. And that to me is one of the huge criterias of us includes that in land use. And there is no report of what animals are in the area. And the city polygon for that, and it shows to be on the city's map as well. The polygon, over 75% of it is on their property. And they should have a ESA report because of that. And so that kind of fails to me in a major area. And we've just seen, the dynamics of rivers and things like that. If you alter the base level, you alter the base level for a lot of people regionally and locally. And if water is hydrology units or even small areas are altered, then they no longer function in the way they do. And that also includes subsurface waters, not just surface. And there can be aquifers, closed and open. And I do feel that with my education, my background, that is what is in this area. And I have concerns about that. And I do believe the applications in general are done and very well done. But that's a huge missing piece of information. As a commissioner, we really need these things to make full decisions. And for our neighborhoods, for the livability, water use, making it be there always. And some people know that the city of Portland, they have had a lot of streams. They're all underground now. They might have two, maybe above ground. I hope we don't come like a situation where we don't have enough water because these units are being altered. And that is my 2 cents. Thank you.
Anybody else? Or yes, go
Commissioner
ahead.
Mansfield, just, I guess, part of a learning curve here, and I'm curious. Commissioner, you referenced a specific study which pinged in my head tonight, a question of, and this may be more directed towards the city. If we had a request for certain things to be done, we could ask for those studies to be done and postpone a vote, or how does that potentially work? I don't know. It's a good question, but I haven't.
If this commission felt there was a nexus of some sort that additional materials were needed in some capacity, you could make that request of the applicant. Although making such a request, I would recommend that you open the public hearing to speak with them and make sure what the request is reasonable. I would also request that it be a nexus that is related to your decision. And I want to clarify 2 things. So there was a mention of off-site parking. So off-site parking is allowed to be part of what's contributed to the required parking. It can't be more than 400 feet away from the development site, and that's pursuant to NMC 15.440.010A. And then with respect to the term that's used for our stream corridor overlay subdistrict is a stream corridor impact report, and that's not required based on the procedures and the standards that the city has in this case. So it is a Goal 5 protected resource. And that's how we define this through that wetland delineation and memo. It wouldn't be considered a memo in the sense that it is typically regulated and what we would look at it as. And so pursuant to 15.342, they've met the requirements, and based on the use that they're proposing, there are certain activities that they need to do, but not that particular report and study. There are different procedures when work is done within that stream corridor that would require a type 2 procedure or a type 3 procedure. Only the type 3 procedure typically triggers that stream corridor impact report, although there are additional requirements for submittal when you elevate to a type 2 procedure or elevate further yet to that type 3. So that's some of why, from a staff's perspective, we wouldn't consider this an incompleteness issue for the standards that we have here at the city.
Okay, but it is in the criteria as one of our decision-making issues. It is not particularly a wetlands delineation or anything like that, but any other potential, that last sentence, any other potential issues. And this is a potential issue because it has to do with our water and waterways.
I would agree, but I would caution you, make sure there's a nexus and what we're requesting is proportional. We cannot be
So
arbitrary or capricious. in
why
the way we
does the
exercise these
city
items.
not require, like the state, reports on wetlands that have animals present and they're supposed to if there's a wetlands on a property by state law? So how is that conflicting with, aren't we supposed to follow that state law?
Other agencies at the state level do other regulatory actions. When they go to do certain permitting requirements, they may deal with DEQ, they may deal further with DSL, they may deal with other agencies. But what we're here to do tonight is interpret and look at our criteria for the city, not those of federal or state agencies. What this commission is given to do is to do local decision-making. So we have to be careful about pulling in things that are not related to our regulations.
So even though I'm looking at a local map that has this on it, it doesn't apply here?
We are using local criteria to make local decisions.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Clay, could you say what that code was one more time for the parking on the street?
So for parking, it's 15.440.010A. And
What-
then,
One,
oh, sorry,
5.440.1.
440.010A.
Thank you.
And then with the one for the stream corridor, the reason I didn't give a section was
That's
because
okay.
depending on the procedure you're talking about, it's multiple sections, so it's kind of multiple
That's-
places in the
I
chapter.
won't make you say that. Unless the chair has something to say, I'd like to make a point here.
Please.
Or unless Randy or Jose, I can't see Jose, so I don't know if Randy or Jose have anything. Okay. Our new commissioner, who doesn't have a name tag yet, Matthew, did the math for me. With the point I was sort of trying to make there, I would like to address that. I would like to move forward with taking a vote, but I would also like to maybe see if we can do it on the contingency that 1.5.440.010 A is taken into consideration, that we have street parking included in that. Or, yeah, who's gonna jump on me first?
So the 440 or 4010, I'm sorry. It just says off-street parking that's required can be within 400 feet of the proposed development. It's not additional to the required parking. It's just saying that the required parking can be within 400 feet. It doesn't have to be on the site, but it had to be either owned by the property owner that's doing the development or a covenant agreement approved by our city attorney that they are allowed to use that parking to satisfy the parking requirements.
Commissioner Mansfield, so ultimately, if there was street parking on Hayes Street, there would be even less spots inside of the lots that would be allowed because they could utilize those the street parking spots as some of the parking as part of 15.440.010. Is that how I understand what you're trying to say? That say there was 20 extra spots, 10 on each side of Hayes Street, they could say, well, we've put in 144 spots inside of these two lots, totaling to 164 spots, meeting their criteria.
So yes, there is, in certain areas, you can provide on-street parking to satisfy some of the off-street parking requirements. In this location, there is no opportunity for on-street parking. There's nothing on Hayes and nothing on Springbrook.
And so, if I understand correct, there is nowhere in our city regulations that state if no parking is available, no street parking is available within 400 feet, regardless of it being counted towards the mandatory, right? That there would be an additional percentage of parking spots needed. Did I make any sense there?
I might get some clarifying. So the 400 feet would not be on-street parking. It'd be adjacent to the development. So the Oak Grove Apartments to the east there, when they did their required parking, they did it within the parking the development themselves, and then they also created parking on Hayes Street to satisfy the parking requirement.
So it'd just be displacing and restructuring the total. The point is that it's not adding to, it's just moving around the same number to different spaces.
Correct.
I think that's the point we're trying to make, is
Yes.
it's not taking the 164 and requiring 10 or 20 more.
Correct.
It's just playing a game of Tetris with the exact same amount of cars.
Pretty much, yes.
Okay.
So what I'm trying to state is, yes, is that, and that as a, if I got everything I wanted, that the city charter doesn't put in a place where if we're putting a development like, or putting in housing in a space where there is no street parking anywhere close, that the only parking for those residents will always be what is put on this property, that there would be a need for additional parking. And that isn't in our regulations.
So yes, you're correct. So city code for this development required 164. The only way you could require more is to find a finding is the conditional use permit as far as the compatibility of the surrounding neighborhood not having enough parking if you were to require more.
Perfect. Thank you. Sorry for taking all that time to get to that understanding.
We'll just need to write our representatives.
Planning commissioner, right? Is street parking considered, okay, there's that Fred Meyer parking lot that is close, and part of that is completely empty over by the US Bank a lot. And could that be considered street parking if they negotiated for off-street parking?
Is the portion you're referencing, is it inside the parking area or is it on the street leading up to the area?
It's outside, it's in their parking lot, not on the street, but would that be an equal qualifier for?
Well, so I want to make sure that, and part of it is I'm a little confused. And so I feel like there's three different things going on. There's the parking, there's the amount of parking spaces that they are required to provide. There is a provision in a different section, which we have not cited yet specifically in talking about this, that's an on-street parking waiver provision, which they don't have access to because there's no on-street parking available. That required parking is off-street, on-site parking. And the citation that we did provide, 010 subsection A, is related to the ability of the applicant to use off-site parking. It's also off-street parking. So it wouldn't be on-street, it would be off-street and on someone else's property. And so that is something you can use to attain the required parking that is on your property. And that's only allowed in certain zones. This is one of them. And it's only allowed to be up to 400 feet away. So I don't know exactly where the portion of area that you're talking about is or how close it is. But it's really an enabling condition for someone who needs the ability to meet the parking requirement, can't do it on the property.
So this applicant has met the parking requirement on their property. Any other regulations that we have in general would just work to allow them to have less parking spots on their property. Not this particular applicant, but an applicant in general. All of our regulations provide stipulations to allow them to have less parking on their property, not requiring more.
I'm uncomfortable saying any other provisions because there's an entire chapter. So I'm not really willing to say that, but I think that where you're going in
As
general.
a generality.
As a generality, there are other mechanisms not available to this individual. The required parking is intended to be a relatively, I mean, in the context of a complicated project, simple way of saying you must provide this. We also have a provision that says you cannot provide more than, so we have parking maximums as well for some of these. They're not exceeding that from our analysis. But that off-site parking provision is just intended to give some flexibility to a developer.
Jason, are you good? Planning Commissioner Quinn, I move that we vote on the Planning Commission Order 2025-03, which approves the request to conditional use permit design review and stream corridor application with the attached conditions of approval in Exhibit D, Yamhill County Tax Lots R3216, 02017, and R3216, 02025.
I second the motion.
Faye, could we have a roll call, please?
Randy Rickert,
Yes.
Jason Dale,
Yes.
Lainey Quinn,
Yes.
Chris Wright,
No.
Linda Newton Curtis,
No.
Matthew Mansfield,
Yes.
Jose Vallapando,
No.
that's 4 yeses and 3 nos.
Okay, motion passes.
Final question for staff. This is just a recommendation and that's going before city council, isn't that correct?
That is incorrect. An order could be appealed to the city council within 14 days of notice of decision.
Okay, so just information for people here, if you have a problem with this, you are able to appeal to city council.
14 from notice of
And
decision.
also, if you do appeal to the city council, it's necessary to make sure that you're citing the code that is not being met.
By the way.
Thank you all for coming.
And so thank you, staff, for doing all of that work. That was a lot.
Thank you, Rachel.
Yeah, thank you for doing that. That was a lot. So commissioners, do we want to carry on, or we've got one more thing on the agenda for this evening? Can
We
we?
have two, just the legislative and then
Yeah.
items from staff. Yes.
So yes is the answer.
We have a city councilor who's waited this
I know we
time.
have.
I
I
feel like
know.
we should.
They can't.
It could be a conflict of interest.
Because if some of you is important hour.
All right, let's move, if we're ready, to the legislative public hearing. For DCA 24-0002, the code maintenance package. Call for abstentions, objections, and jurisdiction. Okay, hearing none. Could we have the staff report, please?
Thank you. Good evening, Chair, members of the Planning Commission, Scott Siegel, Community Development Director. And this is a legislative hearing that is before you on Planning Commission Resolution 2025-398. This is what we've titled our Code Maintenance Package. The commissioners have previously, with the exception of Commissioner Mitchell, Mansfield, have received a couple of presentations. At your last two meetings, we went over the content of this package in detail, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I wasn't planning on representing it tonight, but I did want to report back to the commission that on a couple of items where you had provided feedback and direction, we've responded by incorporating those changes or updating the document. So the document that you have before you is the same proposal that you saw before with the exception that language on wetland delineations, which you had some deliberation on, has been revised so that for site design review applications, we would be asking for the same information that we would ask for if it were a land division application. And that was the need for code maintenance, is that we had one set of requirements in one procedure for land divisions, and we didn't have the equivalent requirement for site design review. So what we've proposed in this package is just to make that language consistent. So the city's requiring that the same thing for both. The second amendment is in the parking section, and interestingly enough, this is, after all the discussion about parking, the commissioners were interested in seeing an amendment that would allow a parking study option in addition to the other tools that are in the toolbox for parking. And this would be in situations where the proposal, the business or the use is unique or has a different parking need than what our one-size-fits-all parking table would provide. And so it provides that tool for an applicant to study their use and propose a parking standard that is unique to that use. And then that would be a type 2 review, so there would be a public notice and an opportunity for one to appeal that to the planning commission if they disagreed with the city's decision. So those were really the only two changes from what you've seen previously. And I don't mean to put anyone on the spot, but Commissioner Mansfield, if you had any questions or if there was anything that this body had discussed in the previous meetings, that I'm happy to entertain those and from any of the commissioners. Otherwise, the purpose of the meeting tonight is to conduct a public hearing on the package, and I don't believe anyone has signed up to speak, but I'll ask Ms. Bates if there is anyone.
So just Commissioner Mansfield here to ask about that parking deal. How would that get put in place? How would, I guess, the request for that study to be done? Just as a example for what we were just working with this apartment complex coming in, is that something that, because it'd be a part of our regulations, we could decide to have done at the proposal in a meeting, right? Like 30 minutes ago?
Yeah, that's a good question. So this is a parking study that would be initiated by an applicant. So it's not a conditioning authority for the planning commission, but it is an alternative pathway for development applicants or business owners to attain compliance.
Got it. So in a little bit more of a layman's term, an applicant could say, hey, I recognize I'm not going to meet the standard, but I think if everyone looked at it with good faith, they'd realize that we could use some adjustment, and they would put in that appeal. It's not something for the commission to look at and say, we think that this site, due to the uniqueness of it and the concern of livability, we are going to request a study be done.
That's correct.
Okay. So it couldn't have been used a half an hour ago.
It wouldn't have been applicable this
Okay.
evening.
Thank you.
And that concludes the staff presentation. So if, and for, as protocol, you'll want to open the legislative public hearing, and if you're so inclined, and deliberate, close the hearing and deliberate.
So I'm opening the public testimony, and since there is nobody here to testify, let's close that and move on to final comments from staff and a recommendation.
Quick comment. Can I second something? Would I be able to second this thing when it comes through?
After the, yeah.
I gotta be quick.
When the
Gotta be
motion's
quick
been
on my-
made, you gotta be
okay.
fastest.
I'm just curious. Thank you.
No further comments from staff other than the recommendation to approve Resolution 2025-398, which would be a recommendation to City Council for approval.
Thank you. Do we have any deliberation, commissioners?
Thank you again to
Just
staff.
about
Thanks,
Yeah,
guys.
thank you,
I
staff.
appreciate you guys.
Hearing none.
I guess I am curious, at least how does somebody first something? Because you guys have brought up numbers that I don't know
Okay,
whether.
planning
We have
right,
to make a motion.
planning commission, planning commissioner right. I'm getting tired, can you tell? Moves to adopt resolution 2025-398 as listed with exhibits A-1, A-2, B, C, and D, a resolution recommending city council amending Newberg Municipal Code Title 15 Development Code to clarify regulations to comply with state land use requirements and improve customer service in the permit process, and amend Title 5 Business License Regulations with corresponding cross-references.
I second. Where did you find that though? Like, I don't even know where you're reading that from.
Could we have a roll call, please,
There we go.
Faye?
I see it.
At the end of a staff PDF, there will be the recitals page. And that's great terminology right there.
We're having a roll call,
Uh,
please.
Randy Rickert,
Yes.
Jason Dale,
Yes.
Lainey Quinn,
Yes.
Chris Wright,
Yes.
Linda Newton Curtis,
Yes.
Matthew Mansfield,
Yes.
Jose Vallapando.
Yes.
Motion passes. And then items from staff.
Given the hour and everything else, all I have is the schedule that was shared with you. We do have another one that's got 2 quasi judicial items planned for next month. So thank you everyone for being prepared tonight, but I don't have any other updates for you right now.
Associate Planner Cromie, just update, the Craft Industrial District passed the city council on Monday by unanimous vote, and that will go into effect February 7th, assuming no appeals, which we're not expecting.
Great.
What did the council think of everything? Any comments?
They were in favor of it, and so I don't have a whole lot more for you.
Okay, any items from commissioners?
Yes. I would like to know if you had your baby yet.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. What did you have?
We had a boy named Kurt.
Oh,
Congratulations. Okay, with that, meeting
And-
adjourned.